was.
It really likes Hannah.
Yeah.
Who
I
does?
think it takes turns.
Well, now I know it. Just a quick announcement here. It is 2 o'clock. We would be calling the meeting to order, but we are gonna wait. We are waiting for our Macy friends to be joining us. We're gonna be having a joint meeting this afternoon with Macy, and so we're just going to be on hold until they show up. So thank you, anybody joining online, for spending your summer with us. We will get back to our meeting as soon as we can. Call this meeting in order. It's a regular meeting of the Montana Board of Public Education. Today is July 16th, 2025. And we are meeting at the Montana School Boards Association building at 863 Great Northern Boulevard in Helena. We will begin with our pledge to allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Chris, can you please call the roll of the Board of Public Education members?
Jared Clark.
Here.
Ron Slinger.
Here.
Lisa Schmidt. Here. Julie Maxwell. Here. Madeline Quinlan. Here. Hannah Neeskens. Here. Renee Rasmussen. Here. Lydia Comstock.
Excuse.
Superintendent Helen. Here. Commissioner Christian's office. Hi. Governor Jean Forte's office.
Thank you. Jordan, will you please call the roll of your Macy members?
Yes. Are there any guests on Macy? Callie Michael. Okay. Michael Dolson. This is Jordan. I'm taking the roll call for Macy members in attendance, and I'm going to start with Michael Dolson.
I'm here representing Confederated Salish Kootenai Tribes.
Callie Nicholson.
I'm here representing the Billings Urban Indigenous population.
Then in person, Iris Killeagle.
Present, representing Little Shell.
Norma Bixby.
Representing Northern China.
Dawn Bishop Moore.
I'm here in Indian Public Schools of Montana.
I'm Jordan Langford Forster. I'm the chairperson of Macy, and I represent the Montana Federation of Public Employees on our Macy board. Dugan Coburn.
Here, Dugan Coburn, I'm the representative of urban Indians in the Great Falls Public School area.
And then we have several ex officio members and also invited guests joining us as well. So, Brooke Gondra.
Present, Office of Public Instruction.
Great. Ivan Small.
Ivan Small,
Present.
descendant of the Crow and Northern Cheyenne Tribe.
Anyone else? I don't see anyone else, so. So for us.
All right, thank you. The Montana Board of Public Education encourages the public to participate in board discussions. Persons who wish to participate should sign the public comment sign-in sheet and identify themselves to the board chair or executive director prior to the board's consideration of the matter into which the persons are concerned. Anyone wishing to participate in board discussions will be recognized by the chair in keeping with normal board parliamentary procedure. We discourage public comment on personnel matters and ask that you discuss these issues in private with the board chair. The Montana Board of Public Education is a professional development unit provider. Attending a BPD meeting may qualify you to receive professional development units. Please complete the necessary information on the sign-in sheet if you wish to apply for professional development units. At this time, we will welcome any visitors joining us. Do we have any visitors online?
If folks online want to introduce themselves, please raise your hand now. And Shelley, I see your hand up.
Hi, my name is Shelley Turner, and I'm the Executive Director of the Montana Association for School Business Officials. Thanks for allowing me to join you today.
And Doug Reisig, I see you and yep, go ahead.
Yes, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Doug Reisig, and I'm the Executive Director of the Montana Quality Education Coalition. Thank you for allowing me to sit in on this meeting.
And then I also see Kathy Kinchelo. Remember, I promoted you, and go ahead and speak now. Kathy, can you hear me?
Oh, sorry, I can now. I apologize there. I'm Kathy Kinchelo, the Director of Planning with the Montana Community Choice Schools Commission, and just listening in, love to hear the reports and updates. Thank you.
Ms. Bopham, you have some members from MFPE here today.
I do. Hi, everybody. My name is Kim Bopham. I'm the Director of Public Policy and Research for MFPE. One of the professional development opportunities that we provide teachers from across the state is the Teacher Leadership Institute. So teachers from across the state join us in Helena. We had our new cohort came in yesterday, and our graduating cohort is here with us today. So all of these teachers have chosen a project that they feel is important and want to improve their leadership skills by going through this program. And so we have teachers from Kalispell and Dillon and Montana City and Butte and every place, and Florence and Billings. Did I miss somebody? Oh, Belgrade, I shouldn't have missed you, Liz, I'm so sorry. So I think that them understanding how the Board of Education works is super important. And so they are here with their coaches, Teresa and Gia, who are amazing.
Would you like to introduce yourselves, or it's good?
Peace Deputy Chief of Staff of the Office of Public Instruction.
Anybody else? All right. At this point, we'll open the meeting up for any public comment. It's time for public comment is for items not listed on the agenda. There are also multiple other opportunities for public comment during our meetings. We also take public comment prior to any action item as well, but so at this point, is there any public comment? All right, seeing none, board members, entertain a motion to adopt the agenda.
Move to adopt the agenda.
Board member Quinlan with a motion to adopt. Is there a second? Second. Second by board member Rasmussen. Any discussion for board members? During public comment? All those in favor of adoption of the agenda, say aye. Any opposed? Motion carried. We have agenda. All right, at this point, the next items for today are under Macy and tribal consultation. So I'll hand things over to Julia Maxwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I will give the floor to Ms.
Thank you, Chair Tharp and members of the board. Thanks for bringing us together for this joint meeting. Start with our Macy Shara. We adjourned about 23 minutes ago. Made it over here. So it was just an informational meeting today, not large action items. We did move to remove our August meeting off of our calendars. It's just a little bit of a crazy time for everybody. So our next Macy meeting will be August 1st in person. It'll be a working session, and it will probably be the majority of the day. We would invite anyone from the Board of Public Ed to attend, anyone in the Office of Public Instruction. We just shared what our calendar looks like for the rest of the summer and throughout the year. And we're excited to learn that Dr. Brooke Gondra will be taking over the lead for both what was formerly separated IFA and American Indian Student Achievement sections will be rejoining each other, as it makes the most sense, and Macy supports that fully. So that's really exciting news, and we're happy to see that in a good direction. That's really all I have for now. I'd entertain any questions or comments.
Sure. Was it October 1st?
October 1st
Is the next.
Macy meeting, and it'll be in person in Helena.
I attended the Bozeman High School graduation and was really delighted to see students in their regalia. And I was wondering, do you think that's an issue that's pretty well behind us in terms of schools having students confronting the barriers about wearing them?
I will say, I think that it's helpful, and I think that it should continue yearly. That April May compass that the superintendent's office puts out. It's been including the language or surrounding protection for Indigenous students. I think that should continue. I haven't experienced any cases recently, but I don't want to turn it into a situation where we think we've moved past it and then we get a new round of educators fresh out of college, or even admin who are unfamiliar with the rules. They might be moving from out of state. So I would recommend that we continue to really advocate for that yearly. Thanks. Question.
Chairwoman, I would just like to add, Member Quinlan, that we did receive inquiries at the OPI and some questions and concerns and so we did work to provide the direction and refer people back to the statute for guidance.
I think that's my. See, Chair.
Very much, Mr. Chair.
Right, item number 2, review and receive feedback on a Yellow Kitchen settlement requirements. It's something we've been actively involved with for quite some time, and have a call kind of give us a summary of where we are with this, what's happened, and ours of having Macy here at the table with us is to provide us some suggestions and guidance on the best ways to proceed forward with this settlement and what we need to pass.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So, for those following along in the board packet, we're on page 12. Folks are on the table. We did provide you the items from our packet so that you had them in front of you. We did include in there the actual settlement. It feels a bit dense, so I also provided an outline separated into some specific buckets that really helped us sort of think more broadly about how we best track the settlement requirements and how we can, sort of loop them into different requirements for us at the board. And so what I was really hoping to do today was to kind of go through them and to think through, like from the board's perspective, some of the things that we know are prescribed to us from the settlement. Like we know we have very specific things that we have to do, but then there are some things that are a bit more broad. And so we have some ideas, but then also looking to Macy to maybe provide us some suggestions and insight into what we might be able to do to fulfill those obligations. And so what I'm going to do is to broadly go over the settlement outline, and that's on page 16 of the packet, and again in your packet here. And just kind of pause after each one of those buckets and talk a little bit about what it is that we maybe have planned, or things that I've been thinking about or that we've discussed as a board, and then really open it up to not only Macy members, but other board members, to our ed partners, and sort of see if there are other things that come to mind for you. I also want to note that we talk about House Bill 338 a lot because that was the legislation from 2023, but do note that that is from 2023. There has been another House Bill 338, from 2025 legislation. So just remember that we're talking about Indiana for all, and so keep that in mind as we reference House Bill 338, because it is referenced in the settlement specifically to this. So just remember that. Before I get started, anyone have any questions before I jump into this? All right. So at the top of the document, you'll see that there's a key there, and this specifically comes from the buckets that are from the settlement. I think it's important to put those in there because every single one of these comes directly from the settlement. I did not change any of the language. I didn't summarize any of the language. I wanted to make sure that what is in the outline directly comes from the settlement. I didn't want to paraphrase. I wanted to make sure that we were being really specific and making sure that we met exactly what was required of the board. So in the first bucket, the first two items really come from assessment and accountability measures, and the third one comes from tribal cooperation and parent communities. The first two really come from what we're doing here today. We're meeting jointly. We're going to hopefully maintain this new annual tradition of having a joint meeting of the Board of Public Education and of Macy. This is something that we actually had been talking about prior, of something that we were hoping to make an annual tradition. You'll see in there that it also talks about requiring that the Office of Public Instruction annually report to the Board of Public Education on some very specific accreditation outcomes. Again, we had been thinking about putting together a requirement for Indian education for all reports to the Board of Public Ed. This is something that we had been asking for from the Office of Public Instruction and receiving from them for the last couple years. Now there are sort of some specific requirements that we receive from them, but it is something that we'll continue to receive. And actually on Friday, we will get a report from them with some of these specific measures. It's under the accreditation committee, and that's because the information that's being asked or required that we now receive is really accreditation specific information. And so you'll see probably from here on out that a lot of the Indian Ed for All requirements will actually be under our accreditation. And then the last one under annual is really around, like I had mentioned, meeting jointly with Macy annually to discuss Indian Ed for All. Certainly we're doing that here today, but I think annually as we continue these conversations, I do think that we'll get more into discussions around professional development, what those resources are, different survey and complaint responses. I just came from the Macy meeting. I think we had a great presentation from Mike Jetty. He provided a lot of resources and professional development that they're working on. I think bringing some of those presentations to this board would really fulfill that and would be really great for our board members to hear as well. So I think some of those things would be really great. So I guess at that point, I will pause and see what other ideas folks have, what questions you might have for me.
This is public now. It's the agreement, so.
Yes, thank you. Yes, sorry, I should have mentioned that. So at the board's March meeting, the board reviewed the proposal, the final proposal from the ACLU and the plaintiffs, and the board proposed a couple additional revisions. And it did go back to the plaintiffs. They agreed on them and it was signed, whatever that date is, on the back there, April. Thank you. In April. So it is public now. It's in the packet, so it definitely is public.
Is the Office of Public Instruction settled as well?
So the trial has been completed at the with the Office of Public Instruction. We are very thankful to have Eisen our team and leading those efforts. She's here as well if there's any more in-depth questions. However, we are under settlement negotiations, so we can't get too into the weeds, but we are happy that those negotiations are underway. We had a full day meeting recently with the AU and we're able to agree on many items, but had a few left to consider. So the teams have been going back and forth and working on coming to solutions that we can implement, and it's been a pretty incredible experience to explain, how big Montana is and how many school districts we have and how important this work is, but how we can make sure that we can move forward in a positive way and do it well. And so we are proceeding with those negotiations and hoping to find resolution soon.
You know, so add that during the negotiation process that we had with the board, with the ACLU, negotiation makes it seem like it's it's not contract negotiations with give and take and that sort of thing. A lot of it was just us explaining what the governance structure looks like. And it was a lot of, there's a perception about what this board can do and a lot of misunderstanding about what we absolutely have no control over with all of the hundreds of schools and administrators and teachers, thousands of people all over the state, what we actually have authority over. So I can imagine that the Superintendent Helen's office is dealing with similar sort of things. And people are shocked and disappointed to realize that the Office of Public Instruction does not have the ability to come in and with a heavy hand and tell schools that they have to do certain things. In some areas they can, but not a lot. So that was what a lot of what our negotiations were, was explanations of governance and discussions about what we actually are capable of doing. And then when we get to that part, once there was an understanding there, then we can say, okay, yeah, this is something we are capable of pulling off, and we'd be happy to do that for the benefit of all the students.
Thank you. If I can just add, Mr. Chair and Chair Langford, one of those examples is OPI requiring school board of trustees to be trained in EFA or to participate in tribal consultation. We, board of trustees are their own governing body. We cannot require them to do such activities. So where we said we are more than happy, and I of course volunteer our excellent team of experts to put on a section at the MTSBA conferences or give access to our learning hub courses or those kinds of things. We can offer those to trustees, for example, but we cannot require or have no way of enforcing school board trustees to do those kinds of things, for example. So a lot of areas where there was some great ideas and very thoughtful ways of moving forward in a positive way to further Indian education for all in Montana, as well as increasing our student outcomes for our Native American students. Figuring out what that balance is, what we can and cannot do, like you said, and then also, of course, working very strongly in collaboration with the Board of Public Ed and Macy to accomplish a lot of these goals that are going to come out of these solutions. All right, any other thoughts, suggestions in this section?
I think with the legislation that's been passed, the last session and this session, will give also public instruction more authority in working with the school systems and holding them accountable to ensure they implement. Take the legislation that we.
Iris, do you mean the reporting? The reporting requirements?
Correct, after the legislation.
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit. The Office of Public Instruction will be working on fully implementing the legislation, which does require more accountability and reporting requirements. So we will be putting all of those components in place and working closely with all of you. We will be consulting and asking for advice from Macy and working closely with the Board of Public Ed on what that looks like and how we follow through with that. And then we'll bring those reports and the follow-up to the Macy meetings for review, as well as Board of Public Ed, and make those available to anybody those are some of the things that are under our settlement negotiations, how we will provide this information to Macy and to the public. And so Katie Bloodgood is our legislative director, and she was there throughout the session, and we supported a lot of that legislation. And then she's staying on with us, which is unusual for that role in the OPI position. But she's staying on to make sure that we have a very detailed plan in place. We have the data collection system set up. We work with Dr. Mergel, with Brooke and their teams to put all of these components in place and follow through on that. So yes, we are working hard to get all of it lined up to implement, and also to make sure that we put good professional development and good information out to educators and administrators on what the expectations are, what the OPI will be collecting and requiring. As you know, we've already greatly increased a lot of the things on the negotiations, for example, and in the legislation. We were like, we've already started that, we've got that. So those were exciting things to be able to say, we've already moved beyond this, we are already doing these things. And So we've made great headway already, but we will be taking further steps, and we're very thankful to our partners like school administrators, Montana, MREA, for helping us get that information out and providing opportunities for professional development to make sure that everybody understands what those expectations are. So like Jenny and I will be presenting at the SAM conference coming up, for example, to the administrators to share some of that information and even more exciting information on best practices and other.
And I guess go ahead. I was just gonna say, I guess one thing I would add to that is, maybe part of that accountability is that information is going to be reported to the Board of Public Ed. And so it's going to be public in a way that it was never public before. And so I think that if nothing else, two things are true. One, it's much more clear from the legislation that if you don't spend the funds, you're not going to get them in the next year. And so I think that in itself is a very big deal because school districts are going to lose that funding. I think the way in which it was written the previous year, there was a little bit of gray area in how that funding was reduced, I guess. It is much more clear now. So if you don't spend it, you're not getting it. And then also the second piece of that, the language in our settlement here says that if you got a 1 or 2 on your accreditation, which means frankly very low, you're the lowest of the low, that's going to get reported to the Board of Public Ed. If you look in that report that we're getting from the Office of Public Instruction Friday morning, we're going to see all of those schools that they're going to show us that they did very low on their Indian Ed for All reporting. And so we're going to be able to see that, and it's going to be reported to the board like it's not been reported before. So I would say the accountability piece on their plans is going to be reported differently as well. So not only on the funding, but also on their Indian Ed for All. So I would say the accountability is different and how it's reported on the accreditation side will be different as well. Oh, yes.
Thank you. So I was on the committee where we were working out the settlement agreement with ACLU plaintiffs. And I think one of sort of the bigger questions that we had in our board committee was, what does tribal consultation look like for the Board of Public Ed? And I think this is a super important first step. And all tribes are represented here by the members of PACE. But I would like to hear anybody's ideas about how we can make that more meaningful, more in-depth interaction with specific tribes.
Are you moving us forward to education?
Well, oh, okay, I'm sorry, I didn't realize. Still,
I like it. Let's do it. Let's move on.
Did we miss anything in the?
I don't think so, no.
Can I ask a quick logistical question about the reporting? Who's tasked with monitoring the reporting of schools? Is that the accreditation department? Who looks at all of the reports, the EVE reports that schools send in to the Office of Public Instruction?
The accreditation section is under accreditation. Depending on where we end up with settlement on some of the other components, it could be in other areas as well.
And so let's move to the next section. So I think that's a good segue though, because that is obviously a big question that we have. The next section is, I've kind of dubbed education because I think it incorporates a lot of different things. Education for our board, education in general. The first one specifically is around, tribal consultation, educating our board members. There's some language in there about working with Macy and OPI to invite involvement of representatives from every tribe to discuss the introduction to Indian Ed for All class. Talking about by 2029, potentially identifying and making any necessary updates to that specific class. And then talking about in the event that micro credentials become a thing, that we would then work with Macy and others to create an IndyNet for All micro credential. And then lastly, there is another one on the next page that the board would work with Macy and OPI to invite involvement with representatives from every Montana tribe to determine whether new IndyNet for All professional development materials or courses are needed, and encouraging Macy and OPI to create the same. And so I think obviously board member Quinlan, I think started us off really well. This I think is a good start thinking about tribal consultation, but I think we want to think a little bit more broadly about that as well. And I think as Macy starts thinking about their travel schedule as well, and you guys starting to travel to potentially, you know, the tribes across Montana, how we can maybe engage in that a little bit more, what that might look like. And so I'll open it up to that, and then obviously any other sections in here if you guys have any ideas. And also board members, if you have any ideas as well, this is also a new conversation for some of us too, so please feel free to chime in. Did you have anything else to add on that? I kind of did jump in the middle of.
The only other thing I would say is that in the past, Board of Public Ed has used one meeting a year to hold meeting at a school on a reservation. And I think that's a good idea, even if we can't do it every year. But I think it's a good thing for us to consider.
And if there aren't schools that are able to host or enough schools, I do think the tribal colleges would be a good resource too. They have often bigger facilities.
Oh, yeah, Burma, go ahead. Go ahead, Myrna.
I think one that I see the lack of communication. And I'm sorry, the lack of communication between OPI, Board of Regents, or any of the entities that work with tribes. Somewhat the Board of Regents have kind of resolve that a little bit by inviting all the tribal colleges to be part of that. I think communication and information shared. I don't know whether you've shared this document with the tribes yet. And that needs to happen, and let them know what the plan is for IFA and getting it to all schools in Montana. So I think communication is really important. I do know that the Board of Public Ed has made visits to the reservations and explained their programs and title funds and IFA, and I think that should continue. That the Board of Ed do, and I do like the idea about the Board of Public Ed having a meeting on the resolution that that say, you know, we're interested, we are part of this, and we want to, you know, communicate with you and be friends, I guess. And I think tribes really appreciate it, and I think that communication has been really lacking.
Norma, I think also what you're speaking about right now is similar to the conversation that we had during our Macy meeting, whereas in the past, historically, Board of Public Ed has met on a reservation, but also Macy moved our meetings around. And I think that as we move forward with this and our renewed partnership with the Office of Public Instruction, that it's very likely that together all three groups will be able to do what we're describing, is having meetings on and off reservations in different locations to learn about their programs and also strengthen our relationships with community. And so thank you for mentioning that.
And if I may, part of that goal also is to make sure that we include the tribal colleges, the tribal council, get as much parent input, student voice. So we definitely I'm hoping that you guys will choose to have your in-person meetings on reservations as well as in areas where in urban centers that we have a high Native American student population.
I have not done this and I apologize, I have done this, but I think it was to have within 6 months of being appointed to the Board of Public Ed, you're required to take the Indian Education for All class. We're going to be implementing this, we're going to be supporting it, and so forth. We should lead by the example on that. I have not. And I apologize, but I absolutely think that is my commitment.
And it is required for those of us who have licensure. Just.
And that's a great idea. Is that the hub course? Yeah. I helped write it, I can give it to you right now if you want.
That'd be great. If you send me a link, I promise I'll sign up immediately.
You've got a question.
Yes, thank you, Chairperson Seifert and Chairperson Barb. Again, for the record, Dr. Gondera, Office of Public Instruction, Tribal Student Achievement Relations, and Indian Education for All Director. I would like to, I guess, address tribal consultation as a whole for a second. I've been with the Office of Public Instruction just a little bit over a year. And part of my role in tribal student achievement and relations was to engage in tribal consultation. And we began to follow the model that was already in play when I came to the agency and found that it has not been very effective at all, i.e. it's been virtual. And so I had been tasked with looking into how we might revamp and restructure OPI's role in tribal consultation and the work that we do that now is being obviously dovetailed with the new legislation that there are going to be more components around having to do that EPA compliance and accountability work. And some of the feedback from the field, and there are lots of models out there, and I actually have visited with several states. There are quite a few toolkits out there around tribal consultation. The first caveat being that in the field I have had experience with, there are a lot of our tribal communities that don't realize, and this is partially to Norma's point, and where we can figure out where the communications are breaking down. But folks, the local school districts don't to some degree realize the local control, if you will, that they have and where tribal consultation plays into that. And they're very sometimes shocked and surprised that they're like, we didn't know we could do that. Oh, we can do that. And so we're really needing to definitely revamp that understanding throughout the state with all of our tribal communities. But it's also was brought to the attention that it might be a better model to meet once or twice a year in person, like other states do. And I guess where I'm going with this is that if we could streamline our work, that if it's going to be a recommendation or a decision out of the board to set tribal consultation into motion, that we work closely on that so that maybe we could actually do it all at one time, once or twice a year. In other states, these summits last 1 or 2 days. It's been very hard in a 3-hour session virtually over the phone to really get at the guts of tribal consultation that is critical and core to the work that's been mandated and legislated to the work that we do. So I just ask that in this conversation that maybe those components, as the OPI has already had a role that we've been trying to strengthen and figure out ways to do better, that as we bring in this new EPA component, that we can talk about that and see if we can piggyback as much on as possible to really get at the truth of what tribal consultation work means in the state and in communities. And even within tribal communities, it varies on what that looks like, but we know, there's general overall guidelines and rules to what that should be, and we're not meeting that expectation at this point in time. So it is something that's pretty high on my radar that I would like to take on and continue to work on in the coming year. And I know that, I don't know if the superintendent has seen it yet, but there was sort of a skeleton proposal put forward just as you were coming on board about how this might look. And in a nutshell, it's kind of what I've explained, but also it would require, a dollar commitment in addition to a time commitment. That's my soapbox about tribal consultation. So thank you for your.
Well, and that's the challenge I face from the field as well. The schools that I oversee are a couple of small independent elementary districts way on the eastern border. And within my county, I'm thinking about all the schools in the county, all the districts in the county, and who do they need to go to, which person? And so that communication, I agree, and of course, communication is always both ways. Who do we reach out to? I mean, go to the yellow pages and look up tribal consultation, or how do you find it? And that's where it's struggling. And then also from the field, all of the different, again, I'm just thinking about my world in Richland County. How many different people from Richland County and all the different schools there reach out to the exact same person and inundate them with what they need to do for tribal consultation, and then overwhelming them. So try to figure what does that, and I agree, what does that authentically look like?
I have great news for you.
Good.
The Office of Public Instruction is nice. I found this out last week during the presentation, is they're working on some documentation to provide a list of knowledge keepers from around the state of Montana that they're forming a relationship with, where they're giving their permission to give my name to come to your school or be a guest speaker. And so we're really excited about that. Mike Jetty shared that last week, that it's in the beginning stages. I believe it's called the kin, like a relative list, but it's OPI will be working, the IFA department will be working with tribes directly and getting names and recommendations for those that are willing to go into schools regularly and share their knowledge. So
Previously in Macy meetings, we called that the Mike Jetty stamp of
the
approval.
Mike Jetty stamp of approval.
Now there'll be more formal.
Yeah.
I would just like to add that, there are tribes that don't have education departments. It's part of their governance, and so we really need to ask them to step up and recognize that, for their tribe, it's very important to have somebody in education so that all of us can communicate.
And I'd like to piggyback on that, because I think our tribal leaders need to understand the importance, the role that they play in helping our students to be successful, not just our students, but all the students, to bridge that gap. And yes, that's a very good point.
Chair, and kind of looking at my scope, which is I'm a superintendent of a school. Not only just as to Mr. Chairman Tharp's point, who to contact, but then what to ask. Cause there have been times in my short tenure as a principal superintendent, I just called every single tribal office I could think of and go, I don't know what questions to ask, but I wanna make sure I'm doing this right, because that's what it says I need to do. And the person on the other phone was like, let me call you back. So I think even just down to bare bones guidance of what does a principal need to ask? What should they be looking for? Like what consultation means on their side, as well as what it means for the tribe. Just because coming out of, your degree as a principal or a superintendent, you're not given that training. So you don't even know what to ask. And especially when you're going into it wholeheartedly, wanting to do it correctly, having written guidance on, hey, these are things you can ask, or what other people have done is always very helpful.
Great. Oh, yes. Go ahead.
I think, point of who you contact on reservation. That I think is our responsibility as Mason members working with tribes. We need to, after this meeting, and I intend to give this document, if it's okay, to my tribal president.
It's public.
And have him, I work with him to set up a process of how we can help support it, the public instruction, Word document and this document. And come up with a plan, and not only to help the two organizations, but also to help schools in our area. So I think falls on us as tribal representatives to go back and set up a process so we don't have that issue. That who do you contact? Well, I'll take that responsibility on for my tribe, so I don't have to press it into.
I really appreciate that, because they said that's the problem we face. I've been able to leverage personal contacts. I mean, I did my doctoral work with Sean and Lynette Chapman. So I was able to get a hold of Sean in my schools when it's needed to do some tribal consultation. But we've got, as board member Maxwell described, we've got a whole crop of young administrators, brand new administrators in the state. I don't know, Dr. Watson, probably tell how many hundreds of brand new administrators we've had over the last few years that haven't forged those personal contacts with people across the state, and they don't have any idea where to begin. So that word would be one.
Thank you. If I can just give a quick update that might help with that as well. Yes, we're very thankful to have Dr. Gandira to help us with this guidance. So she'll have guidance out, and that's a big part of her role, is to support our state and schools in what tribal consultation looks like, depending on, you know, if you're on a reservation, near a reservation, in an area like Helena where you have students from multiple tribes, right? Or you're in an area where you're hundreds of miles from a tribe. Are you gonna drive there? Are they gonna drive to you? Are you gonna attend a Macy meeting? I mean, what does tribal consultation look like for those schools? And so part of that conversation has been happening with the ACLU and, you know, these different instances and the level of tribal consultation that needs to take place. And so one of the things I wanted to share is that there's great work that has been done that we can use as a model, and we just need to make sure to get that out there. And we'll work with our partners in education to get that to our school leaders and educators across the state. We had a great meeting with the Commissioner's Office of Higher Ed. We spent a long day with them. They gave us a lot of their time, their leadership team this week, and we talked a lot about what we can do together and these important components that we need to make sure everyone comes out of their programs with the understanding of. And these are the kind of topics that we covered. So that's a great opportunity where we're really collaborating now with the Commissioner's Office on those educator and administrator programs on these expectations and what these you know, what implementing Indian Ed for All looks like in the classroom across content areas, and as an administrator, what tribal consultation looks like, and how you do that meaningfully. And then I thank you for what you said. I completely agree. We have Macy with representatives from all tribes, and so to leverage that as much as we can, and have those go to people with you guys right here around the table, and then also kind of creating that list of who we can reach out to and connect with, because we need tribal representatives on our rulemaking committees, as we do standard setting and all of those things. And sometimes it can be hard to find the right person, or someone that has the flexibility in their schedule, or ability to travel or join us virtually for those lengthy sessions of time. So that is an important component.
And if I could add on to that, the model that I would like to give back to either jointly, but also with Macy, is that the meeting that we had, the Board of Public Ed, that main meeting when you were able to, and I know I'm a little biased because it's my classroom with my students. Doing the stuff that Dugan and I get to do with them every day. But I think that universally that went pretty well, just in terms of being able to see the demo of IFA, but also the educational piece where we talked about Joe Medicine Crow, but also regalia information, right? That's IFA happening in our community when you were all able to join us for that. So that would be my commentaries. I would like to give back to that model of sharing information with each other.
I think that's a great idea. We can definitely make a more concerted effort to include more Indian Ed for All into our board meetings. And All right, I'm gonna move us to the next section. I think the next few sections actually will go quickly. Rulemaking, I'm just gonna note that the first, frankly, 5 bullets are all things that we currently are doing. Including meaningful measures in Indian Ed for All and accreditation that is currently required. Ensuring Indian Ed for All is properly monitored before approving accreditation standards. We did that, if you all remember, in our May meeting. Ensuring Indian Ed for All is incorporated across all of our content standards. As you know, OPI has been doing a really incredible job of making sure that it's done in a very meaningful way. Agreeing and to review and consider all comments and recommendations by Macy before we go through any rulemaking process. That's always been done. And then requiring completion of Indian Ed for All before license of any teachers. We've done that. The last one I think is one that will definitely take a larger conversation, and it's one that we've agreed to do not only in our settlement, but through conversations with legislators. There was an effort to actually put this in legislation this last year, and we worked with Representative Wendy Boy, Senator Wendy Boy. I can't remember which one he is right now, to actually take this out of legislation, ensuring him that we will do this because it was required in our settlement. But we're going to have to do a little bit of work to meet this requirement, but it requires the Board of Public Ed to determine the feasibility of requiring 4 professional development units relevant to Indian Ed for All, of which 2 professional development units every 5 years must be relevant to travel consultation. For all of you educators, as you know, Board of Public Ed doesn't require any specified professional development units. And so requiring specific Indian Ed for All units will be a big change for us. That's not to say that we can't do this. It just is going to be different. And so this is something that we are going to have to start talking about, like how we want to work with the Office of Public Instruction to pull a group of experts and people from the field together to start talking about this and really digging into what the feasibility might be. Dr. Watson and I actually had a very long conversation about this during the session because he has a very long list of required professional development for folks in the field, not required by the Board of Public Ed, but required by either federal requirements or different state requirements. And so, you know, it certainly wouldn't be out of the ordinary, but it would be out of the ordinary for the board. And so this is just one I think is worth maybe a larger conversation. The other ones are things that we already do, would not be, you know, any different to the current process that we're already doing, but wanted to pause before I moved on to see if anyone had any questions or thoughts on that specific bullet.
Well, as an example, like what you're sharing, Dr. Watson, like any of us who have direct supervision or superintendents, we or somebody in our district has to have the training on McKinney-Vento. And so we have to have a certain number of hours of that we report to a different area. So there's a whole slew of all these different pots, but when it comes down to it within Superintendent Hedlund's licensure division, all they count, did you hit 60? You hit 60 by this time? And that's it. They don't look at any of those specifics. So it requires some additional work on how for their programming and their personnel to be able to look at if we started breaking out some individual things. I'm not opposed to it. I just recognize it would be quite a change for us to have an amount of authority.
I just throw out the possibility of using the mass meetings, which schools the superintendents get professional development credit for attending. If there's a way we could sort of document and recognize that in some kind of Indian Ed for All presentation was done at those meetings, not every time, but you know that it happens. Maybe that's a way to verify those credits. I mean, I think we need to think creatively of meeting people where they're at. Maybe not once a year conference that somebody attends. And I think there's probably incredible possibilities with our new Montana Historical Society building about to open up in December. So maybe some little conference there.
I just wanted to say, I sort of agree. I believe that, whatever we can do to make this not be a checkbox is most important, because it needs to be a full integration in a meeting of, several cultures together to make a like-minded direction. And in my limited experience, with education for the last 12 years, if it's a checkbox, it doesn't hit where it needs to hit, become an integrated part. And so whatever we can do to make it be a lasting growth and impact and learning, with educators and administrators and students, I think is the ultimate goal, versus just, oh yes, I took this class. I mean, they could be on their phone the whole time. It should be something that's becomes a part of who they are as an educator.
Good point, Sharon. Yeah, that kind of summarizes all of the major changes we made with chapter 55, with the accreditation. Turning it from a check the box system to something that is actually authentic and integrated within your daily practices. So yeah, I appreciate that.
All right. The next couple of sections are titled encouragements and acknowledgements, and that's because these sections are really ones that sort of don't necessarily require specific actions for the board, but really require that we kind of keep an eye and ensure that we're continuing to do these certain things. For example, agreeing that Indian Ed for All content standards include American Indian Studies. So obviously in the Constitution, we will obviously do that. BPE will encourage all school districts to reach out and cooperate with tribes. We will continue to encourage these things. We've done so through different partners like SAM and others. Encouraging Indian Ed for All partners and other relevant school personnel to participate in Indian Ed for All trainings. We can work with Jordan and Macy and others to fulfill some of these obligations. Certainly, I think there are other ways that we could do some of that as well. Acknowledgements. Again, I think these are both sort of, we're acknowledging that these provisions both exist, and certainly we will adhere to both of them as well. And then finally, the document production and monitoring. I included these in here because they're required they're required productions for us as the board, and wanted to make sure that we were transparent. We document. So, Mr. Chair, I will turn it back to you all and see if folks have any overall thoughts, questions, and feedback for me.
Thing regarding the settlement agreement, additional ideas, thoughts, discussion.
Just a question regarding the October 15th, does that commence this October?
I believe there was language in, maybe it's leading up to this that would be in this.
So I see document production and monitoring in the settlement, but it says for the 3 fiscal years of monitoring ending June 30th, 2028. So that would mean fiscal year 26, 27, and 28, unless you're doing it for 25, 26, and 27, because it's reviewing the previous year.
I think it is 25. That's probably just.
So then we would have a document due in October. So would it make sense to maybe, would we have to approve that as the board? Would we need to look it over at the September meeting?
I don't know that there's necessarily. I will let you know. I'm not entirely sure what that probably needs to look like as far as approval from the board, but certainly there are going to be things that we are going to be producing for the agreement.
I was just curious if the notion of tribal consultation was defined in the settlement agreement.
It's not.
And that's kind of the crux that we've been running into. What does it mean? What is authentic tribal consultation? How do we look?
Mr. Chair, I believe in our settlement, and we are.
Okay.
We're going into pretty good detail in that area.
In the OPI settlement?
Yes.
Okay. Dr. Reisig is online and he checked in Senate Bill 181 and it's not defined there either.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, a lot of our conversations have been, like I said, I mean, what does that mean for Helena, where you have students from potentially every tribe, or when you're on a reservation, or within in proximity of a reservation, like under the Every Student Succeeds Act, some of that is more spelled out, right? So then when do we refer to that versus, you know, what about a school that we have in Montana that is a couple hundred miles from a reservation? What does tribal consultation look like for them? So we've been talking about those different aspects, and it might not be the exact same for every school district.
Yeah, so I've been facing, and I think about this, you know, how the kids that Jordan works with on a regular basis. And the kids at one of my schools, where I have 7 students from 5 different families, K through 6, and that's out in the absolute middle of nowhere. How do we deliver the same expectations of, for all for them as the students that are lucky to afford with Jordan? I can't afford to pay her mileage, or else I would.
So I have a question. Had the Macy's members talked about what does tribal consultation? How do you define that?
We haven't specifically defined it, but in theory, because we have representatives from all 7 reservations, communities, and then different entities, in theory, it's not a government to government representation, but we are the advocates, we're the liaison between our native. So Norma is the advocacy, as she said, she's gonna take this back to her tribal council, etc. We're more of the liaisons. So I don't mean it that we are the absolute one voice for our tribes in that capacity, but more of the advocacy. I mean, we provide information about what's going on in our community. So it's more of a group effort and not a one individual representation. I'm not important enough, I assure you, to speak on behalf of both of my tribal entities that I'm a part of.
So OPI right now is the only one who's really defining the tribal consultation.
Tribes themselves have to determine consultation, and it's written in their own constitutions for their tribal entity.
So is there a way to share that with educators beyond the tribe? I mean, so if Julia needs to reach out to somebody, does she call you? Does she call or Dr. Tharp when he has 5 different tribes?
And that's what OPI is working on right now, is so the idea would be contacting the Office of Public Instruction, and they will provide local people, local knowledge keepers in your area, or if it's a specific subject matter, who they would recommend.
Okay.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chairman, Board. Trump consultation's been around the issue has been around forever and ever and ever. Impact 8 has tribal consultation, JOM has tribal consultation, Title 4 has Title, nobody's defined it, So there's lawsuits that go out there, well, it's not meaningful, so. I applaud the state of Montana Board of Public Ed, OPI. I guess now you got a lawsuit, so you're gonna have.
We're out of it.
Yeah. So. We dealt with this as superintendents running schools on or near original reservations. And so. A lot of folks says, we are a board and you're gonna have to listen to us. Who's running the school? Well, school boards and superintendents, or who's doing what here? And those are hoops to jump over. The biggest thing that I see is don't give false hope that's not there. You talk about how are we going to find this? Good luck.
I would just like to share, because I filled that report myself, answer that question, and having connections with the Little Shell Tribe will make it very easy for me. I do use the Little Shell Tribe because it's right in Great Falls. But I almost went to see Michelle Mitchell over at the Flathead because she said she gave a presentation at Best Practices as I am the person who is defining what this means for my tribe, and people could go there. She put out an open invitation. People went and sat at a conference with her for, it was a full day. And then they had individual meetings with her of how you're gonna implement this. I would love to see that happen with every tribe. Because it is a tribal decision, what do you want shared about your tribe in the state of Montana as your even information? So if we could come around to some point where that is the emphasis, because it is there, a sovereign nation, each of our tribes should be telling us what we want for our footprint that's going on across the state. So just that Michelle, I think Michelle's got a good model that if somebody wanted to look at it, they could go and look at that. I think Macy should probably have more of a tribal summit meeting where we invite all of them into one spot and really address the issues that Norma said she'll go back and address it with hers. If we could do it as a more of a group to cover different areas for different people, I think that would be great. For me, I have 68 different tribes in my school district. And so that makes it hard. But I know what that's between IFA and Indian Dead. IFA is working with our 12 tribes that are here. And so that helps narrow that side down. But I can see where if you don't have connections, right? You don't have that, it's going to be very hard. So I think out of this group, we need to pioneer that solution for them.
We've discussed in the past, also sharing responsibility with the Office of Public Instruction with things like best practices and stuff, because as of right now, it's really disseminated down to the Office of Public Instruction solely as being the ones that put on the conference, right? And we've discussed in the past of like Dugan saying, Macy playing a bigger role in what we're hosting, what we're offering around the state of Montana. So it's just solely one entity's responsibility.
You know, in 1990, the tribes came together. Well, part of the Indian director. In 1990, we developed a plan for Indian education where we set up goals for everybody. And that plan is still relevant because we met maybe the goals in But anyway, we met some of them with the CFA and that's going on. But what I'm thinking is the tribes really took an interest in that and they came together to develop that plan. These were tribal leaders that came together. And I'm thinking the same thing can happen with this issue with the legislation that perhaps we can get a summit or a meeting with Office of Public Instruction and the State Board of Ed, or even invite both regions to a meeting together with the tribal leaders, because they really did take a look at in 1990, and I don't see them, if they're involved and they feel it's gonna be relevant to their children and their success in education, that they will come together, be a part of the discussion about what should we do with EPA. And this information presented to them as leaders. And so I think they would really take an interest if we could organize something where we can all come together and listen to them and see what they really want to do with EPA and with the board then. That's just a suggestion. But it worked in 1990, so.
Well, and like what you said, it came from the tribal member.
Yeah.
And that's key. Every school I've worked at has been a small rural school, not on tribal land, and trying to figure out who to contact. And knowing what our obligations are, I didn't have any impact aid or Title IV dollars, but the thing about IFA is it's universal. So the schools that already are doing that tribal consultation that they have to do for the other areas, they already have the connections, they're already doing it annually. It's for all these other schools that don't have that, especially the schools that are removed from the tribes. So how do we provide that and again, without overwhelming one person? I think we're making some great progress in doing it.
I think it sounds like we should have a conference where all the tribes are there with their EVA presentation. With our administrations from all of our school districts there to listen to one of the 12 and rotate each year and have them sign off that you've gone and you've got that information for your school district. That would be the goal. And every year we have different tribe present. That way that information we get all across the state. Let's do it.
They do volunteer to present at that. Anything else on review and feedback on the ill-located settlement?
If you think of anything else, you have my email.
All right, going kind of hand in hand with this, but our item number 3, work session on American Indian Achievement and Indian Education for All funding recommendations. All page 19.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, for folks following along in the agenda packet. We're on page 20. And then folks in the room, you should have it in front of you in the packet. It seems like this is sort of a full circle moment. It did kind of take us a year to get here, but if you remember last year, Ivan came to our board meeting and said, Board of Public Ed, we have to do something different around accreditation. We've got to help these schools. We've got to work with Macy and your partners. And we said, yes, you are right, we do. So we put this back on Macy. We said, Macy, give us some recommendations on how we can do better when it comes to Indian Ed for All funding and American Indian Student Achievement. Macy put together some recommendations of which you have in front of you. Those came to the Board of Public Ed. Board of Public Ed then reviewed these. We said, clearly we can definitely not do these alone. And so we put together the red on here is what I added. So we thought it made a lot of sense that in this joint meeting that we bring together our ed partners as well. So you'll see around the table, it's not just Board of Public Ed and Macy members, but we also have some of our education partners, many of which introduce themselves and have spoken up already, and some of which that are online. So I hope you all feel free to chime in. Masbo, MQEC, Lance Melton is also online. So please feel free to jump into this discussion as well. But really just want to sort of go through these recommendations and see where we can make some headway. And Dugan, I actually think that your last comment is sort of timely in going into this conversation, because what you're talking about is like bringing in multiple people to, come up with a solution to a problem. And I think that's exactly what our goal is here today. We probably aren't going to solve every single one of these, but the goal is to come up with ways in which we can all work together. And that might be like coming up with sections at a conference or providing professional development to teachers through something, or, you know what I mean? So I just think that really that's the goal for today. So in front of you, we're going to start with the American Indian Student Achievement Gap. There's recommendations that you all have in front of you. And so I'm just going to sort of go through each of these, and as we get to them, I guess I would just ask that folks sort of come to the table with some thoughts on the recommendation. If Macy members want to sort of further their thoughts, that would be great. So the first one was culture teachers should be tribally specific in their content and language delivery when working with students and communities.
So I would say that ties in with our conversation about tribal consultation, what it looks like. There is a deficit, like we've been talking about, especially in rural towns. They think that it's either too difficult for them to be able to reach out to people and get them there, culture or knowledge keepers, but also when education is not done well in a meaningful way, so I'll just give a fake example. Up on, I don't know, Blackfeet Reservation, if you get a teacher who is trying to implement IFA to their indigenous students, but it's not culturally relevant to the Blackfeet tribe, it's not reflective of them, it's kind of the same experience. It's not a meaningful immersive experience. It's going to encourage students to engage fully in it. So just making sure that the culture teachers that are being hired by districts, and maybe that's a district training or district conversation with, I don't know, each school board, I suppose, and superintendents, of how to make sure that their content that's being delivered is culturally appropriate for the students that they are serving. I meant to write that, I just didn't have time.
And how does that look different for students that in a district where you may not have any tribal members? And so what do you present then? So so I'm asking you, Jordan, what do you present to my elementary kids that I may not have any tribal members? And so do we go with the closest tribe? Do we go with where we get somebody?
That's
Interesting.
the tribal consultation that Michelle Mitchell is recommending. It would be the closest tribe, I believe, within is it 90 miles or 45? Do you remember? The radius, something, I think it's 90 miles. So I would recommend the closest tribe.
In having 68 different tribes in my district, I think authentic presentation is more important than which tribe it is. That there should still be only teaching about the tribe that they have learned about and have had the things passed down to them. So that's why I think that when you have this list of the Mike Jetty approval on authenticity of the people presenting, you can get them from anywhere and have them come and speak to your students. I myself present to 68 different tribes in my school district, and the emphasis is that I'm going to teach you what I learned as a Blackfeet tribal member, and I'm going to teach you what I learned as a descendant of the Klamath tribe. And I specifically tell them which tribe I'm talking about, and that the emphasis is on, I'm teaching you what it's like for me and my tribe, but I want to give you the questions to ask the people from your own tribe, so that they'll have the questions to ask somebody from their own tribe when they meet them. Otherwise, they don't have the questions. You could walk in and say, I meet this tribe in Smallwell. I think about you, but if I'm in his tribe and Dugan's presented to me, I could then ask Ivan some questions about my own tribe. What do we smudge with? How do we do things different? And that's what I'm thinking about with authenticity, is having somebody come in and talk about one tribe and what it's done with, rather than coming in and trying to cover both tribes.
Can I ask how that fits with integration across the school year? And I say that because I think as a district superintendent, one of my goals was always to make sure that we were truly integrating and not having simple events throughout the year. So I guess, does this bullet point speak to when you have a specific lesson versus, those integration across the school year? I guess, do you understand what I'm asking?
Yeah, that's exactly what this is speaking to, and it says tribally specific, is we want to get away from broad phrases like the Native Americans believe. So when we are teaching and infusing Indigenous content into any of our curriculum, we're either being tribally specific and sometimes even regionally specific. So we in my literature class, Native American literature class, we read Counting Coup by Joe Medicine Crow, who was a Crow member. And although all of the students were not Crow, we specifically talked about Crow, but also there's a shared regional Plains culture that they could engage in, right? So just being intentional about tribally specific information when you can get it, and if not tribally, then regionally.
Can I add, both talking for the bullet point 1 and 2? I can also see this blending to having those cultural presenters, being available from the tribes, and that might be something, as Dugan mentioned, having, a conference where we bring in the tribal communities. Maybe we can have, a resource. Jordan mentioned this too, the knowledge keepers, where we know who to call on, whether you can only afford to hire a presenter for one time, several times as the lessons require, or maybe even a full-time person to come in. We would have that recommendation from the tribes on who to bring in. The other hurdle that we've run into in our school district is payment on both levels. One is paying for someone and making sure that we have all the paperwork, and if they're coming from across the state, making sure we have that. Not everybody's independent contractors, but then also making sure that presenter understands how school districts might work with payment being a little bit slower, because in the traditional sense, we usually, one, ask them then the right way, but then two, you should have something to hand to somebody right away. And as you all know, from a school district point of view, we can't hand someone cash. And so just making sure we have that training on both sides as well.
Yeah, I think that next bullet, in a way, it seems like maybe it's getting to that like class 7 versus class 2 conversation. And so for folks around the table, the class 7 license is the cultural specialist license, which is different than your regular class 2 teaching license. And it's different to what you can teach and what you're endorsed to teach. And so I think maybe would open it up to what your intention is with that, if what you're maybe asking for.
Not sure what you're.
So it says districts should be encouraged to hire cultural specialists and coordinators from their communities and not limit classroom employment to certain educators.
Right, so they're along the lines of, yeah, so class 7, but also to being given the flexibility where you might have a language speaker come in who's never gotten a teaching certificate. How can we work with them and also employ them, not necessarily full-time, or some type of a stipend system that's flexible where they might be able to come in, with the kindergartners once a week for a half hour and practice language.
During just keep it down.
Yep. School districts should provide transportation for both academic and cultural enrichment opportunities for students, staff, guest speakers to and from communities. So that would be a recommendation for. So I think that would also include the legislature and the annual reporting, is that it's difficult, and Callie, that also leads us to the next one. Providing meals, it was pretty strict on what we could use our title funding for. And continually we're told, well, you can't use it for food. Okay, well, we can't close the academic achievement gap with an after-school tutoring program for our students if we're not allowed to feed them.
So this is actually one that, Susie, I think you were the one, Superintendent Helena, I think you were the one that actually mentioned that schools could use their Indian Ed for All funding for the transportation for academic and cultural enrichment opportunities. I don't know about meals specifically, but is that the case? You speak more of that?
Yes, I know as a superintendent that you can use your EVA general funds for transportation. There's just so many requirements on nutrition right now on food that it's really hard to find funding streams that you can utilize to provide meals for events. So which kind of meals exactly were you, can you clarify what you were talking about there?
Yes, I will, I mean, a variety, so like I said, if there was a tutoring situation after school where we're trying to close the academic achievement gap. Feeding them there, but also providing meals if we had some type of a gathering with families, so. How do we ensure that basic needs are met? And I don't know if Callie wants to talk more about this, about the discussions that we've had concerning the. Not flexible food purchases, but it's really hard to get our students and our families engaged in our school systems when they attend certain events and we're not able to feed them.
Sure. So I think this kind of lends itself both to the achievement gap funding as well as the EFA funding, where if you're having a gathering trying to encourage family student engagement, it's appropriate to have a meal. And recent guidance that we had, I think it was last year, was that EFA funding should not be used for that. But in having gatherings where you might be training your staff, bringing in family members, you should provide some sort of meal for everybody who attends. And then the other side of that, like Jordan was saying, was for the achievement gap, if we could provide some sort of guidance for districts on how to utilize their funding for achievement gap, that might be something as well. If you have a family in need where one of their basic needs is meals, we could put that as part of the guidance to say, yes, this is appropriate to use if you need to help a family with their meals so that they can attend school.
Yeah, we can definitely, I started an email to our CFO, and I don't know if any of you want to chime in on this, that have had these conversations, I'm sure many times, but, and it's always evolving, right? But we receive audit findings for food. It's definitely something that they keep a close eye on. And I know the federal programs have really cracked down on it. Even the 21st century after school programs cannot provide, and even summer programs can't provide lunch anymore. I know at my school district, we work with a local nonprofit and food bank, and others to try to facilitate lunch for the families that were participating in the 21st century program. And I know how important it is culturally. I know that's one of the real ways to get families there. And so I always tried to find general funds within my district or partner with local groups or organizations. We, did some things after school for early literacy, for example. We did an adult ed class to help parents in literacy efforts with their young children. And we provided childcare with our high school students, supporting that and getting their community service hours. And we used some of our funds that were allowable at the district level to provide a meal so that, they would come and attend this evening event when, it's like, we have to have dinner, but this is important as well. So we understood that was a component of it, but it's been a challenge for me in the field and now in this position still. I agree, it's hard because we are not allowed to use federal funds and they've really tightened down on that. Also, state funds and reporting legislative audits having, we've had some findings on those. Do you guys, anyone from OPI or anybody else have anything to add in your experiences with that? Anything that you know about EFA funds or that guidance that we've gotten currently? We could put together, definitely have our team dig in and see if there are different ideas out there for that offer any flexibility. I know for the best practices conference, we're fortunate enough to have some of our partners in a vendor format, that we reached out to help support the meals because we weren't allowed to use our funding for that.
And any sort of guidance documents on allowable fund, what could be used, allowable expenses, non-allowable expenses. I'm glad Shelley is on for Masbo. I can't tell you how many times the last couple of years I've jumped on the Masbo chat board because I've seen somebody say, well, I don't know how to use this ED&Ed money, but my history teacher talks about tribes, so say, and I know you cannot just spend it on a portion of your history teacher's salary. I think we took care of, I thought we took care of that years ago, but there's still that perception out there. And so, guidance documents from OPI would really help.
Yeah, and maybe Shelley can help us out. Maybe she has some ideas as an expert in that area, or as Lance.
Yeah, Lance, go ahead.
Hi, you guys. Thanks for giving me the chance to be here virtually. Just a couple of things to be aware of that, and one of them is fairly recent. When you were talking about sharing an American Indian language specialist, a class 7, there's actually a significant new influx of money, state paid, no local tax effort whatsoever, by virtue of the inclusion of class 7 in the STARS Act. So if you're a district that's complied with the STARS Act, and all but 25 school districts in the state have, and I think it's like 98.5% of the student population is educated in districts complying with the STARS Act, you've now got, if you resource share and 3 districts go together and jointly employ an American Indian language specialist under class 7, you all get to keep a double quality educator payment each. So it's not just the fact that they're finally in the club, so to speak, and provided a quality educator payment and a double payment if you meet the STARS Act requirement, but the resource sharing provides some real significant authority there. And you're talking about between 3 school districts being able to amass $24,000 that they didn't have last year if they resource share on a class 7. The other thing is that what seems like glaringly apparent to me when I hear these discussions about how we're going to spend the resources that are out there is the absolute objective inadequacy of those resources. So if we're talking about American Indian education for all, we sought an amendment this last session that would have created a $5,000 minimum for every school district in the state, because there's far too many of them to get $100, $200, $250 with some sort of an expectation that they're going to provide something meaningful, and then put together a comprehensive report to the Office of Public Instruction to meet the requirements of that law. And when you have in the law that if they don't do so, then they don't get the money, that almost encourages them to not do it and walk away from the $243 if that's the only thing that's there. So I think we need to raise the bar on what our expectations are of ourselves, a recognition that Indian education for all was the most definitively established guarantee in the court's ruling in Columbia Falls in 2005. They said the state is uncloaked. It's completely uncloaked with no defense whatsoever. All we had at that time were the goals that Senator Juneau put into the law. It was actually a great law, but it had a lot of maze and no funding with it. And so, we were so busy trying to say we finally did something that we slapped $5 million. It was $3 million then, now it's $5 million and walked away from it. And the same thing goes for poverty-related funding streams for the American Indian Achievement Gap. When we have a gap that's based upon the concentrated levels of poverty in our reservation areas compared to the average level of poverty across the state, we're going to solve all of that with basically just an achievement gap funding level of a few $1,000,000 and a little bit of at-risk money on top of it, even though the research across the nation would suggest that when you're trying to tackle the issues of poverty and increase student achievement, you're looking at increments that are between 25 and 50% of regular per A and B funding. So instead, we're throwing a very inadequate level of funding to tackle some of these issues. We're allowing ourselves to provide consequence for failure to comply that basically says you just lose a couple of $100, and we need to do better. But those are just some of the things that come to my mind. The other thing is that transportation, the distinction between what's on schedule and off schedule. On schedule is when you're providing transportation to a school for the purpose of instruction. And some of that depends on how you define what the school is, whether it's an off-site instructional setting, sort of like what we have in Red Lodge, where there are students who are transported to a common facility that provides a particular form of learning, and transportation is actually funded on schedule under those circumstances. But even if it's not, Title 20, Chapter 10 says on a crystal clear basis that a local school board has the authority to impose a levy necessary to fully fund their transportation program, not just on schedule, but discretionary. So to the extent that there are some flexibilities in the law that allow school districts to spend money, we should tap them enthusiastically. And where we see levels of funding that are just objectively inadequate for what we're asking schools to be able to do and what we want them to be able to do, then we need to advocate for a better resource distribution here. It's just, I'm just looking up and down the aisle here on the number of districts that get between $100 and $500 a year to provide Indian education for all for their kids. Thanks for the opportunity to comment.
Member report. I'm gonna throw this out here. It seems like we're trying to get class 7 people funded, get them some extra money. Do they hold a license or do they not? Then they should be paid for it. They should be on a teacher schedule. Once they've received that certificate that says I'm a certified teacher, I'm licensed, they're on the schedule. Whatever happens above that, if they get more training or more language, then that's on the schedule, on the salary schedule in the school district. To do so otherwise is crazy. And then we need to be careful here, because a licensed class 7 teacher is a language specific teacher. They're not licensed to teach multicultural education. They're licensed to teach Crow, Cheyenne, or any other 13 tribes in the state. You know, and I guess I look at, you get over here and he's got 68 tribes that in his school district. Are they going to be class 7 teachers or not? That's, I mean, it just seems like we're playing around with things. In the state of Montana, are they licensed or are they not? Then they should go on salary.
Shelley?
Well, I didn't know if Lance wanted to touch base on the certifications before I jumped in on the weeds on some of the school nutrition. I do agree, though, that there are, with what Lance said, especially for those schools that receive very little funding, it becomes very, very hard to make meaningful education out of just a few dollars for an entire number of students within your district. We definitely are seeing that across the board, and some schools are saying, if I can't make it, then I'm just not going to spend it. And we're not, you know, and then if we don't get the $150 next year, it's not that big a deal, but it is, because it's missing the point of the process, right? And that's where we want folks to be able to get that funding. I will jump in really quick, and then Lance can jump in back on that certification if you guys want. The school nutrition piece and the food, it is hard to find funding for food and snacks, those things. Be very careful. I just want to warn everybody to be very, very careful with community provisions of when communities try to donate foods to schools. Yes, we always say, yes, donate to schools, but you have to be very careful too that you're meeting serve safe and other health qualifications with taking in food into your school, and also vetting those volunteers that are bringing those food products into your school district to make sure that they're not around any students unsupervised, or that they have the proper background checks, because we see a lot of schools, especially in donation programs, become landing in situations that are not good in terms of people who should not be setting foot on school grounds. So that's just another caveat when you're thinking about, oh, we'll just get a donation from the community for food or things like that. Just be very careful with that as well.
Well, I would just want to reiterate that our specific intent in incorporating Class 7 into the STARS Act was to remove the distinction, they are defined as teachers within the STARS Act. They're now specifically referenced as the individuals for whom you have to calculate both base salary and average salary in order to determine whether you qualify. And so from my standpoint, I mean, that's exactly what we were intending. And I think that the money follows, that in order to comply, you have to incorporate what you're paying your Class 7 into your calculation as to whether you're meeting the base pay requirement and whether you're meeting the average teacher pay requirement as well. So I hope that we have addressed that issue and resolved it. And then the part that I think that people are not quite yet thinking about is how creative this resource sharing incentive could be in that bill. I think most of us have been thinking, and rightly so, in the context of districts that share school district clerks right now, that you can split them a third and you all keep your quality educator payment. And just like the Class 7, since clerks have never been in the payment at all, you're generating just short of $8,000 a piece for all three of those school districts employing somebody on a 1/3 time basis. Now, is that entirely what you're going to have to do to meet what you really should be paying them? Probably not, but it's a lot better than zero, which is what it was last year. So I just think we need to make sure that we take a look at what the laws allow and what the new laws are allowing, and just make sure that we vigorously pursue it and increase awareness of what the available resources are. And as I'm looking here, Indian Education for All, there are 101 school districts that receive less than 1,000. It jumps to 159 when you say less than 2,000. It jumps to half the state, 199 school districts with less than 3,000, 227 with less than 4, and 254, which is a sizable majority of the state, receives $5,000 or less on an annual basis in Indian Education for All. And that's nobody's fault that's in the room right now, okay? And honestly, I don't know that it's anybody's fault, but I know that in 2005, Governor Schweitzer swooped into the room and he said, I'm going to solve this thing, because nobody was getting it done. And so he was a decisive leader, and he came in and he said, you're going to get this for the quality educator payment. You're going to get that for Indian Education for All. You're going to get an at-risk payment. You're going to get American Indian Achievement Gap. And we will speak no more about this. And that's the way it went. And remember that payment sat still and was not inflation adjusted at all until 2013, when we got it into Senate Bill 175 as an education community, and worked really hard. And ISBC was at the forefront of that battle for us in Senate Bill 175, and got the inflation adjustment. Even then, we sat still for like about 8 years. And what does that do over time in terms of, is the present day value of those funds anywhere near what it was when it first started in 2005, even if you assume for the sake of argument that it was adequate at that time, which I don't.
Yep, we're going to continue. We only have about a little less than 20-ish minutes to go through both of these documents. And so before we move on to the next, we'll just open up the last bullet points to anyone that wants to talk to them, but before we do so, I just want to reiterate, I think we're getting a little bit muddy here. This first page of recommendations where that specifies American Indian Student Achievement Gap. These are the recommendations that are not necessarily IFA, they are the recommendations on what Macy is recommending, how title funds might be spent or thought about, but also how we're serving American Indian students and our families. The IFA recommendations are on the following page. So at this time, we'll open up the last final bullet points. And we can just, I would just open it up to the room for whoever would want to speak on the final recommendations.
Sure.
Yes.
I just had a question, since this is a new term for me. What is OPI's Indian Education Whole Child Model?
Very good question. Does someone from OPI want to answer this?
Certainly. I'm Dr. Gardner. And it is within the Tribal Student Achievement and Relations Unit Sister Unit to IFA. Although we're highly integrated lab to one another work. It is a model that we're doing and using for professional development. We were just down last Wednesday, part of the team and I in Lancaster at the Lodge Educator Conference to present on, we call it our Indigenous Whole Child Learner Framework. And it's essentially, it's got its roots in social and emotional learning, but it's very Indigenous specific. And so how we break out the domains of mind, body, spirit, like true physical health, and those things that it watersheds from there. There's a wellness wheel component of it. It's a tool in a classroom for various kinds of things in terms of what's going on, in student led parent-teacher conferences. It's got multiple uses. That's comprehensive school improvement is utilizing their own wellness model as well. So it's basically the whole child from an Indigenous perspective and breaking it down and how in non-Indigenous white Western culture, often things are like transactional in nature versus in an Indigenous community, family or child in school. It's very relational. It's about so goes from there. Happy to share lots more details.
Can I add one thing to that?
Yes.
I would say it also addresses some trauma related issues that students might be facing and how to begin a social emotional healing journey.
Thank you. Thank you.
Jordan, if it's okay, since you kind of looped in those last bullet points together, I think the big one that I was hoping we could point out was that last one. Similar to what's been required for the IFA funding, for the achievement gap funding to have some sort of reporting that's required by districts to ensure that that achievement gap funding that's specifically designated for our Indigenous students, for them to excel and close that achievement gap, that we know that that's going where it needs to be and not general fund where it kind of disappears. And as Lance pointed out, for some school districts, that could be just a couple $100s for having one student, or in other districts having quite a few. So whatever the case might be, we could give some guidelines, or OPI could give some guidelines, recommendations. And we know districts think creatively, but just to have some sort of reporting out on how that money is used.
Thanks, Kelly.
Do you know if we collect that funding now? Like the achievement gap funding? Like, do we collect, where do we collect it?
It's part of the funding formula.
But,
The component of the funding.
Yeah.
right, but where do you collect?
How are you collecting how they use it?
Yes.
We
You
don't.
don't. And so that's what they're saying, so we need to collect it all.
Districts need to be able to demonstrate how they are assisting our American Indian students and their families, and right now there's not a mechanism of reporting. So similar to this new rollout of IFA reporting, we would like to see the same thing on the academic achievement side. so that districts know that it is an expectation that whatever funding allocated to them that they get, they are using it for American Indian students in efforts to close their academic achievement gap.
So. Been out of this pool, so every school district gets achievement gap fund.
It's based upon the A and B, the number of students in your district who are designated as American Indians as a racial designation. So if you have 10 students, then you get 10 students worth of funding. If you have 500 students that are American Indian, there would be 500.
And how much is that?
Good question. I can pull up. Lance, do you know? Lance?
I guess that this is the relevant
Around
question.
270 a student, around 270 a student. $250 a student,
Per Indian student,
yeah, approximately.
okay.
So that's why they're saying, I only get $200 for your district.
We're not.
If you have one student.
If you have one student,
Right.
yeah.
And
So I guess,
so obviously schools that have a higher native population receive more money. So on the reservations, those schools receive a lot more funds than say schools that are further from those places. So I believe someone made the point earlier that the concern with some of the funding is schools in particular with IFA rejecting the funds because of the not under maybe fully being able to meet the requirements or understanding what those requirements are. Now with IFA funds, I don't believe there would be some sort of rejection process. Those are just designated to schools for the purposes of essentially supporting those students' needs.
so if I'm on the reservation, I have 100 kids, I would get 27,000. I guess, and there's another ball of worms, can of worms that they're being kicked down the road here, folks. I like these recommendations. I mean, Mr. Chairman.
Please, no. I feel.
I've read these and I've read these and I've read these, and okay. Which ones, my concern is we have students failing in our schools. Which one of these specifically are gonna address that issue? I can't deal with this is a baby, this could help. Maybe this will help the kid, maybe this will make this kid feel better, maybe this. When you look at this then. The OPI in coordination with student provide, let's go to that bullet. There's a specific provide adequate reoccurring person school board training on reservation community. Then we have to determine how are we gonna implement that? How are we gonna make sure those school boards, as I read this again, still with school boards? How are they then gonna act differently so that they run a good school? I guess I'm gonna put it out here, folks. If I'm basing the achievement of our Indian students on or near those Indian reservations, especially on the reservation, I'm gonna say we're not running good schools. When I have a school 100% novice, am I a good school? I hope the heck you all say no. So we're kind of mixing things here, folks. School boards put out policy that should be followed. They don't run schools, they put out policies, right? The superintendent should be running the school. That's what they hired. The principals then should be ensuring that those key teachers have the resources and are implementing the curriculum that's put forth by the board. Those teachers then should be teaching those things and using their skills to make sure our Indian children, and I'm gonna go back here and specifically say, I'm really looking at the Crow and Northern Cheyenne because that's where I come from. And almost to the number of those schools on those two reservations or right off the reservation serving those kids are not doing an adequate job. And so that's what we need to get to. These bullet points address the board. The boards need to pass policy. They need to hire a superintendent unless the superintendent dies tomorrow, and then they're starting to look for a superintendent in July, which a lot of these Indian schools have been doing, looking for principals to hire just before school, but that's not on the radar. And then hiring teachers who are there to teach these students so that their academic achievement is met. You know, when you talk about teaching the whole child, really sounds good. Districts should be doing that anyway. If I have an attention deficit, you should be addressing that issue. If I have a behavior issue, you should be dealing with that. If I have an attendance issue, then that's what you should be dealing with. So you know, you don't have to change anything. The structure, as I said the last time, is there, right from the Board of Public Ed all the way down. And I guess, why can't we hire? I know there's a teacher shortage. Everybody's saying there is a teacher shortage. There's triple that shortage on Indian reservations. Why? If you can't get teachers, why is that? And then address them.
I think this last point too, is probably really ties in with what you're talking about, that the legislature should require school districts to report the use of their achievement gap funding. So I think we're dealing with a lot of unknowns, like you're discussing, what are the districts using these funds for? How much money are they receiving and what are they using it for?
I guess I wrote under that, all state funding. You know, if I'm a failing school, why is the Board of Public Ed accrediting me? Why? And I'm gonna go back to OPI has been providing this training for years, for decades. Just like this. Even to the point where they fired some principals and some superintendents, I mean, just wiped them off. The OPI says, superintendent, you're gone. Principal, you're gone. In order to get this funding so that they could provide more training.
Well, I mean, I've talked to some folks from around the country after our previous conversations. And one of the issues that we face is our governance system is different in Montana. I talked to a friend of mine who's the board chair in the state of Texas, and they recently took over a district. They had that ability to come in and do exactly what you're saying. So look, you ain't getting the job done. And we're gonna clean house and take over. See, Lance has his hand up, and maybe he can address some of the governance issues that we face here, but that's why we're at the table here today. And that's why our next agenda item is, talking about what can we do regarding this rigorous action. Lance, you want to respond?
Couple things. Montana is one of 5 states in the country that have a constitutional basis for supervision and control by elected trustees. Our iteration of that guarantee in Article 10, Section 8 is the most strongly worded provision in any constitution in the nation. So, I know that sometimes out-of-state consultants will come in and say, yeah, everybody says they're local control. But in 45 states, if the legislature passed a bill tomorrow saying there's no more school boards, that's the way it would be. And that's not the case in Montana. Now, I don't put that up as a shield. It's just a reality of what we're dealing with. And the other thing I would say is that to some degree, we need to give a little bit of a break to all of our administrative leaders, our teachers, our schools. I really think this is in large measure a resource issue. And if we step past that resource issue and just pretend that we can do these things on gas fumes, I don't know how you're going to make it happen. The research out there right now is that you need high intensity one-to-one tutoring in order to overcome achievement gaps. So how much one-to-one tutoring, high intensity tutoring can you buy for $242? Just about none. And yet that's what the research says. And so we're distributing achievement gap money that's based upon a significant gap. I mean, our American Indian students are graduating in the mid-60s compared to high 80s in the overall aggregate. If you look at the percentage of students in novice and nearing proficiency and advanced, you'll see this very glaring gap there. And we're trying to solve it with pennies. And I just don't see how that's going to work. Now, could we be better with the money we have? Absolutely. Should we account for every dollar we receive? Of course. But do the math, guys. At 25% of an $8,000 per A and B amount for high school in any formula out there that's actually doing anything remarkable is 25% to 50%. Massachusetts, I think, is 50%. Massachusetts has done this high dosage tutoring and coaching, and they have effectively taken a group of students who were significantly behind and learned 1 to 2 additional school years of math in a single year. But it doesn't come cheap. And that's the reason that they spend $1.4 billion more a year on a per pupil basis than we do. And we don't need to go to 1.4 billion. I know that's never going to happen. But we should demand, as long as we're talking about accountability, we should demand an accountable school funding structure that provides our school districts with enough resources to reasonably attain success, rather than just bemoan the fact that they can't get there while we're 35th in the nation on total current spending per pupil, 38th when you include capital expenditures, and even as an affordability index, 42nd in terms of what it costs to educate kids in Montana as a function of every $1,000 of personal income. It's an adequacy issue. And if we don't remove that issue from the equation, all we're going to be doing is hoping that people are heroic enough to overcome every single hoop that's been put in front of them and every obstacle that's been placed between them and the finish line. And the finish line is closing that achievement gap, creating opportunity for each child in every public school, including and especially those who are currently suffering by relation. And just go right into OPI's data. I've got it up here, but I can't screen share right now. But if I could, you'd see that the gap is very real, very significant, and is not going to be closed on $240 a kid.
And then after that, then I want to move into item 4, because I think this leads right into what we're going to talk about.
Just a little bit about funding, and I think I reported to you last time, just on the OPI website. The average cost of educating a kid in Montana is $13,500. That's the average spending rate These schools I'm talking about, folks. Lakeview. Ashland Public. Fire Public Schools. Wyoming. They don't spend any less than 25,000. And upwards to 30,000. So money is not the issue.
Well, one thing that we do have some control over at this level is accreditation, and then through the OPI with rigorous action and intensive assistance that we can do for schools that are continually non-performing. So at this point, I'm going to call on Dr. Mergel and OPI to present, and this is our opportunity then to ensuing discussion. What can we do? What should we be doing to address these perpetually low-performing schools? Go ahead.
Just make a quick comment before I move on to that. I just wanted to say, and you know, we can work with Shelley and our partners with Dr. Watson on these items. Just like we added, basically, I believe a lot of schools were using their EFA funds for EFA related materials. A lot of our clerks are new and changing and all of those kinds of things. And I want to give our schools a lot of credit. And our teachers and our school leaders, I do believe there's a lot of great Indian ed and across our schools, but we do need to, you know, have accountability measures in place. A lot of the districts, just because it had been coming in the general fund, hadn't separated it out into a separate code. And so then all of a sudden when asked, it was like, let's go back through all of our receipts and see which ones were Indian ed activities. So now there is a separate code. Shelley and everyone has done a great job of getting this information out to the districts. So make sure, you know, and as a superintendent, you know, make sure if that is an Indian activity, you put it on your requisition form so we code it right and all of that. So same thing for the student achievement. We can just maybe create another code, Shelley, or work with you to come up with a solution to that, work with you guys to come up with a solution to that. And then once again, that needs to be, we need to provide training to our clerks and our school leaders and our educators to make sure that that's being done. Because a lot of times I think even more money than schools are getting is spent towards Indian ed and Native American student achievement. However, it's a matter of, you know, how you're accounting for it and coding, and it gets into, you know, is the clerk on the same page of and understanding that this is a activity that relates to that and on all of those different things. And if you have a tutor that is supporting Native American students alongside of other students from other diversities or, you know, whatnot, like how are you going to break out that tutor's salary to say that that was for that specifically? Just those some kind of thoughts on that. So just wanted to mention that OPI doesn't know about hire fire superintendents or principals in Montana, but I do know. I just quickly want to mention we Tyler and I got to go to a national conference on Native American student achievement and many other great topics, and there were some incredible models that we got to hear about. You know, some states that have done some bold things that lead into this next conversation about, you know, an hour and a half of reading required of that evidence and research-based curriculum, an hour and a half of math required, administrators that hold those, you know, hold that time of the day sacred, and teachers that implement that with fidelity. And they actually extended their school day an extra hour a day, and they saw those results and turned that, you know, the achievement gap around. So it does take time, effort, all of these things that, you know, taking things to another level. So really interesting. And then there were a lot of things that was like, we've been doing that for a decade in Montana, but that people shared as best practices that hadn't helped. So anyways, sorry, thank you.
Good, Dr. Mergel.
Good afternoon, Chair Barb, and PC Chair.
Forrester, members of the board, and members of Macy and our educational partners. Me, Julie Merkelsfield, and you are chief for the record, and I'm the chief program officer. And joining me today is Lindsay Mahoney. I'll let Lindsay go ahead and introduce herself and continue remotely so that we can share our screen.
Hi, I'm Lindsay Mahoney. I'm the director of school improvement for OPI. Thank you all, members of the board.
So the purpose of our presentation today is to build on the conversation that we were just having about how are we reporting out on EPA, or how are we using our American Student Achievement Gap to address the performance that we're seeing in our schools that are on or near reservations. We also want to seek from the BASI members some information and advice as the board heads into a conversation on Friday about intensive assistance as part of the accreditation process. So as Ivan is mentioning, he said the question was, like, what is the accreditation status, or what is happening within the accreditation process for schools maybe where we see some really major concerns, in particular on our reservations. And so that is the purpose of this conversation. And so we're really wanting to, if you go back to see to the overall at the start there, if you don't mind, way at the top. But we really want you to we want to set the stage for you all to have a conversation. So we have some critical questions that we want you to ponder. We're going to give you a very quick overview of some information about the federal accountability system, and then the accreditation system, and conversation, hopefully, to think about what are the implications for those two together. And so when we get to that piece, I think you guys have really talked a lot about, why is this essential for us to be thinking about? Next slide. And so we have some questions here that we're going to come back to after we just give you a brief presentation. I want you to be thinking about what implications related to intensive assistance, which is a designation from the accreditation process, should the Board of Public Ed examine for schools with high percentages of Native American students where we are not seeing them being served to the level that they should be and receiving the results and outcomes? What key data and insight from the Board of Public Ed and Macy regarding student proficiency should be shared with the accreditation think tank as we start thinking about student performance within that? What does that mean? And how can the OPI reframe school improvement using both the state accreditation and the federal accountability system to ensure quality education for students in schools on or near reservations? And last, we just wanted to ask for some input on, what are your thoughts about using a 0 year of planning and hiring of a transformational coach within the tribal community to redesign a school? We'll talk a little bit about that. But I just want to set the stage. We're just going to provide some information and then come back to these questions to really allow you to engage in a conversation and for us to listen. So next slide. So I'm just going to have Lindsay very quickly overview with you what the federal accountability system is and how it works.
So under the Every Student Succeeds Act, our schools in the state are labeled as comprehensive, targeted, or universal. And if they are labeled as comprehensive, they are not meeting the requirements in these indicators. So they have low student achievement and growth. Their English language learner progress is low. Their graduation rate is below 67%. And then the fifth indicator for our state is their attendance. For a student to have satisfactory attendance is below 95%. And then they're lacking in college and career readiness, and then their science assessment is also the lowest 5% of the state. So today we're really talking about those comprehensive schools, and then more specifically, rigorous action from that. So schools that are identified in rigorous action in our state, we have 15 schools that are in rigorous action this year, and they have been in the lowest 5% for really 5 years. It was supposed to be a 3-year cycle, but it's really a 5-year cycle due to COVID. This year is like the key year for those schools. If they want to exit, the data from this school year is the exit year. So the 25-26 year. For our rigorous action schools, we are supporting them just as we were any of our comprehensive schools. We're still going every month and helping support them. We have OPI members assigned to them. We are ensuring family and community engagement, evidence-based interventions. We help develop their ISAPs. And to say a couple of our schools, I know for a fact, scored all fours. I think Hayes and there's a couple of scored fours across the board, so it's amazing. But they have not made improvement in these goals. They're not reaching the goals. They're not exiting. They're not showing a 4% or more growth. Also, another way to exit is their CNA pouring fours, CNA. And then their accountability detail reports. They're scoring really low on those.
So that's a little bit of information about the federal. We did provide you your board packet, and this packet starts on page 23. You'll see a list of schools that have been identified through the federal accountability system as being comprehensive. And then an asterisk next to them of the schools that did not exit comprehensive after 3 years and moved into rigorous action. We will notice on that list, there's predominantly schools that are on or near reservations. So as we look then at the second piece around the state accreditation system. So the state accreditation system takes 2 pieces into place and bring them together. One is on the assurances. Those are like all the inputs. Do you have family and community engagement? Do you have a mentorship program? Do you have teachers by ratios? All of those different kinds of inputs. It also is 50% on student performance. And so that piece, we've just been rolling out our new accreditation system that Dr. Clark had mentioned. It's no longer a checkbox, much more meaningful demonstration of evidence schools have these pieces into play. We will be moving into and have a think tank where we have superintendents who are really thinking thoughtfully about as we start to move into 3-year cycles, what is it going to mean for the student performance component? Because when you put these together, if you're coming up regular in your assurances and you're deficient in your student performance, then you become deficient overall. And so right now, you guys, we've just finished up that complete cycle for every school. We currently have 6 schools that have been identified as being deficient after this last set of accreditation this summer in May that you guys approved. All 6 of those schools are on reservations. It's Lame Deer and Park. And so part of that is around those statuses is if you become deficient, and part of the consideration is that the board will be thinking about on Friday is, even as we start to move into the 3-year cycles, schools that did show up deficient this year should be back on cycle again next year to see if they're making the necessary improvements. Because if you have 2 consecutive years being deficient, then you move into what the Board of Public Health has defined in their ARM as intensive assistance. And intensive assistance, if you remain in intensive assistance, then you would move into what we call a non-accredited status. The board has never non-accredited a school. And so as the board is moving into thinking about what this intensive assistance process is going to look like on Friday, it's important to be, considering what does that mean? And I want to just share because I know you've been bringing up these data. And you guys, I think this was a point that we brought up with the think tank. And we had members who were really surprised, superintendents. But we have, in the state of Montana, this data is from 2023 when we measured everybody on the same Smarter Balanced assessment. Of the 626 elementary schools, we have 22 schools of 0% proficiency in enrollment. They don't have 1 student. We have in those 626 schools, 44 who have less than 10%. Of those 28 are schools that predominantly serve Native American students. When we look at our mathematics, we have 33 schools in the state of Montana with 0% proficiency in math. 13 of those 33 are serving our Native American students. And then we have 10% our 66, we have 66 schools that have less than 10% proficiency. That's 37, which are predominantly on our reservations. When we look at our high schools, we see even more, I think, some dire results here. We have 9 schools that have 0% proficiency in ELA. 14 of our 171 have less than 10% in ELA. 6 of those are honor year reservations. Of our high schools, we have 23 high schools have 0% proficiency in mathematics. And of those 23, 18 are on our reservations. And then we have 39 of the 171 that are under 10% proficiency in math. 27 of those 39 are on our reservations. I don't present this data to just be dire. I present this data to you to be thinking about as we start to look at 50% proficiency coming back into that accreditation process. If we have 0% proficiency for a school, what does that mean for their accreditation status? If they're deficient and then deficient a consecutive year, move into intensive assistance. What could potentially the board be considering, if you will, on how maybe we start to elevate and support those schools to really start to come around? What does intensive assistance really look like? And what does that mean for a school to be put on intensive assistance? And how might we combine these two systems together? So I think I just want to now turn it over to you guys to kind of have a conversation. Just wanted to lay that data out there. I wanted to be able to talk about what these two systems are and be thinking about what are those implications for the board as they head into a meeting on Friday, thinking about the intensive assistance process.
Well, thank you for that introduction, Julie. And it's so important to try to figure out what we can do. And that's the question that I have, is what are we capable of doing? As Lance described, we're one of 5 states. We can't just come in and take over the school. We as a board. I mean, we do have certain levers that we can pull. I mean, theoretically, we could do something to withhold some funding, and we could put them as non-accredited. Now, what does that mean? What does that accomplish? What does that do for the school? Taking away the funding, not going to help, I don't think. Still non-accredited, then those students that do graduate, what happens then when they move on to higher education? They're not graduating from an accredited high school, therefore they're not being accepted into college. I mean, the way I see it right now, those are the only 2 levers that we have as a Board of Public Education to pull to do this. And so that's why I wanted Macy around the table, and specifically Ivan, I wanted you here, say what can we do and what sort of intensive assistance can be provided so we can move the needle on this, because those numbers are absolutely not acceptable. And so that's right. Here it is. What's the first question? What implications and what can we try to do for these schools? Wide open.
Well, first of all, the first thing I do is I would ask Ivan, who's lived this, you could wave a magic wand, what would be the one thing that you would ask an entity like the Board of Public Ed to do, since we don't have the direct, and then I would ask you, okay, what, wave that same magic wand and do anything, what would you do? So the first thing is, do you have an answer to your question? What is it?
I would start with the Board of Public Ed, just as you said. If you're not providing an education, why are you being accredited?
Okay.
Period. And to answer Dr. Tharp's question, if they go through a non-accredited school, they're not going to get accepted into college. My question back would be, are they being accepted now? Dude, I gotta have a score that sets up here somewhere that says I can go to college, I can perform at college. So because of the situation, I'm gonna call it non-education, our kids are relegated to stay at home. They can. Along with them, folks, along with schools is not just education. You learn social skills. You learn responsibility skills. And if you're not providing those things, they can't even go get a job.
So. If I could,
And so I guess to answer get back to your question. Withhold accreditation. And if you're not providing an education, why have a school? Because in the state of Montana, you can go to the next district. The borders are open. And with the impact aid following that student, guess what? They bring double the money.
so the next thing I would like to say is, as I read the packet, we're going to address, I think it's Thursday or Friday, we're gonna look at a report on our charter schools. Thursday, thank you. And I don't know if you've read that part of the packet, and if you haven't, there's some really exciting things that are being done in there. There's some really great things that I think that could have an impact on a school like you're talking about. At least I really think that they were applied there. And so maybe that's part of our answer. That's maybe what intensive assistance looks like. It replicates something that we have found in our own Montana schools that is being successful. I don't know if it can be replicated in a failing school that been for so long or on a reservation school. I don't know that. I never taught on a reservation school, but I taught in a lot of schools that were challenges. I taught in a school that was a challenge, and I was a superintendent in 2 schools that were challenges. And I think things can be done.
But good, had the opportunity to visit several schools in the nation. I went to Harlem. Harlem has a school within a school. And those kids are progressing rapidly. Because almost every parent will tell you, I want my child educated. And so there is a charter school. Think about a charter school. Why not set up a charter school on Crow Reservation? Why not set one up on the Northern Cheyenne? And here's your charter school, and it's what the charter looks like. It's a high expectation of academic performance and behavior and attendance, period.
And if you don't meet them, you don't get to stay.
And if you don't do those things, go back to the regular school. It's a novel concept, high academic performance and expectation. Parent involvement, absolutely. Child consultation, absolutely. I'd love to start a charter school on these reservations. But it's a school where behavior and attendance and academic performance is promoted.
I think we have a few of those in our charter schools that we reported that could serve as models, or at least as beginnings of models.
And you're gonna have, I think we'll have to look at what the mindset of these communities. You know, we went into a school where we said not only 10 consecutive days per semester, but 10 days. If you go beyond the 10 days, you have to have extenuating circumstances. I know in that school, we had a pregnant mom. Couldn't make it to school. we shuffled work back and forth with it. You know, and attendance, you have to have a child there to teach them. They have to be there. And bless his heart, J.R. Clark was a superintendent of Browning Schools. But he came there with the attitude, if you're in my classroom, just being in my classroom, you're gonna learn something. It's just gonna rub off like I'm that good of a teacher. And then in those charter schools, find best teachers you can find, whether they're Indian or non-Indian, and don't make that an excuse.
So, like, just free for all guys, gentlemen.
Yep.
Protocol.
Yeah, we got an armor blocked outside, we're not.
Okay, thank you. So say we unaccredit a school district. What's and we understand it makes it more difficult, they still have pathways to college and so forth. There's other mechanisms that we use besides just high school transfer. But, what does that do to the school district? Do they lose funding? Do they not? Are non-accredited school districts funded? I mean, I don't know. I would like to know that. I'd also like to know of these school districts that have 0% and 10% support, what are their high school graduation rates? And how are they? I mean, I'm trust me, I'm the board, I bang the table all the time. When I see the damn report, excuse my language, about, oh, here's our proficiency, and I'm like, well, how many are we at 80 or 90% high school graduation then? Because we aren't proficient in English or math. At anything above 36, 40, right? So how in the heck is anywhere in the state at 86, 90% graduation? Because we're not there with proficiency in those two bellwether needed necessary skills. So with all this, so there's additional data I would like to know, but I really the non-accredited part, the students still have pathways. The ones that would continue on still have pathways to continue on. There's just other assessments that we do and use now.
The other question to ask too is how it impacts their involvement with the Montana High School Association in a non-accredited school.
Yeah, you got that off, you got their attention. I'm not being funny, I did say it.
So they would no longer be eligible for just participation in athletics. Yeah. Or which is one of the main.
Sure. You know,
Main keys to keep it in school.
I just did bring you an answer, how does the graduation, how come they're graduating, I know of a principal in one of these schools. Who has the doors locked because they says you can't graduate these kids. I'm not signing this document that says they met the requirements of the state of Montana. Computer shut off, out the door you go. And so to answer that question, somebody fabricated or somebody signed papers that said they met those standards, that they did not. And it's obvious.
I think one thing we need to talk about are unions.
Are the what?
Unions, teachers union. They're an issue in Montana, I think.
Hey.
I'm sorry, but they are. I think, I know, I've never worked in public school, private school. And I've never been on a public school board, been on a other school boards, but never a public school board. So I might be just from knowing what's happening on Northern Cheyenne. school board member who works in my office, we're discussing majors on what are some possibilities? One of the big things that we think is the union. Some of those teachers have been there so long, they can't get rid of them, even though they're valuable.
Because they're like tenure. Sorry for interrupting.
Can't get rid of them, and those teachers know these kids aren't achieving. But the union protects them. And doesn't, the administration and school board, that's one thing Kim and I were talking about, is their contracts are coming out again. And maybe they need to work with those teachers on saying, you know, these kids aren't achieving and you know it. So we need to do something to change things around where you will be accountable for the education of those kids in regular school. I don't know how that contract's gonna, I mean, I don't know how that discussion's gonna, like, I don't have privy to that information, but that's just what Kim was thinking about. And I think that is something that is an issue, and a lot of these Indian schools in union, because Montana has a really strong union. And they've got, someone has got to talk to this union about these kids not achieving. What do you do? You know, what can you do as a union to help our Indian kids achieve? You know, what are some of the things you would recommend? Langer School has one of the highest salaries per person. $10,000 startup, if you come to Langer School, you get $10,000.
As like as an incentive.
As an incentive, but what they're getting is not quality teachers, that comes from the money. The school board is hiring not quality teachers, we think already. Some of the new teachers, which we haven't got, don't have too many new teachers, so we're all dealing with old teachers. But the other thing is that the union's got to take some ownership in this, I think. That's what I think anyway. Because I think that's part of the issue. As for our kids going to college, I would look at the scholarship program. Those kids that are coming out pretty low in high school can go to a community college. We have 7 tribal college. They can go to college, maybe they might get into the university system, or they can go to training. And I'll tell you that some of those kids, Indian kids that are coming out of our later high school that we fund, something happens to them in college. They start achieving. We don't look at their transcripts because we have so much money for scholarship. We have a lot of money for scholarship. So we don't even look at their transcripts. We give them a chance to get started. We provide the services to help them get, work with them, work with the parents, work with the university system that are having issues. And I'll tell you, some of those kids coming out of Langer School are achieving and completing their education. And I don't know why that happens. I think it's because of the system that's set up for them. They don't have to get up early. They can set their classes. They can pick some of the classes they like, if we watch that. So there are some things that help them achieve that they don't get in high school. You have to do what you know, sit at the desk all day, go through a textbook or whatever, you know, and some of that education does not work. That's what the whole child thing, I think, is a really good idea, because that system does not work for our Indian kids, and I've been saying that for years. And even in our tribal schools, it does not work for Indian children, the system that Montana has right now.
Julie, did you have
textbooks, testing, all of that, you know, does not work, but that's my problem.
Thank you.
How many other questions did you have?
Just three, there's one more question. I kind of took it once, Dr. Tharp mentioned about the student proficiency, and as we kind of moved it here, something for them to consider. I had one more, there's 2 more questions. But this one kind of alludes to the one we've already talked about, right? Which is how do we potentially reframe school improvement and thinking about both the federal accountability and the state accreditation system, maybe a little bit more hand in hand. And then the last question, Dr. Tharp, was around, we've been thinking about and considering what we call a 0-year planning. Being that we can't like close a school. What could we do to say this school needs to keep operating, but then we're gonna hire a transformational leader, go into the community as part of the community, have a full year to plan out
starting a new school. And a full redesign from the top to the bottom of what are the systems, the whole child support systems, the academic systems, the retention, recruitment efforts. Very similar to what Board Member Rasmussen was talking about, which is with your charter application, right? How do you get that to be, because guys, in a lot of situations, our leaders and our educators cannot find time to really do that deep work to set all of those systems up because they're so busy just trying to survive the school in and of itself. So we thought about wondering what you think of that idea. Because if somebody gets into intensive assistance, what is it gonna mean for us? Or if they're already in rigorous action, what can we do to kind of set the stage to say, let's be asset-based approach. Let's start from, let's build it. And then in a year, we're gonna switch everything over to the new system and the new pieces, kind of similar to what you've talked about, Ricky, in a charter school application. So thoughts on that?
So for a 0-year planning, the students would still be there, they would still be attending school, right? 0 year doesn't mean that they would stop. I would recommend you pitch that to Heartview, see if they wouldn't want to pilot it. I don't know how risky it would be, or if you even had the infrastructure or personnel to pilot it or to start this 0 year in multiple places, but I think it would definitely be worthwhile to offer that to at least the 2 schools that you mentioned. So Heartview for sure, and Lame Deer maybe.
We did talk about the charter school. Starting the charter school, that's on our, part of our discussion in the office.
Is Northern Cheyenne starting a charter school?
Well, that's one thing we're thinking about.
Okay.
Going in that direction because of the issues that are going on with the bureau and the tribal school. And then the government, the funding there, and then issues with Ranger School is probably to look at a possibility of charter school. And so I think we're going to Hardin to take a look at their charter school, how that's set up.
Would our existing relationship with Cognia be any help to setting up how they would look at those structures? So if they did a 0 year, partnering with Cognia, who already has those plan, they kind of do that in a sense with Cognia schools, that we wouldn't have to start from the base. They've already proven that their methods are successful. So you could, nope, we're going to use Cognia's setup to make it this way.
I did meet with them. We've had extensive conversations about some of this and accreditation. And that's the thing, it kind of goes back to like what you were saying, Ivan, is like, how do you just continue to be accredited if you're not meeting some kind of marker, right? So that is why Cognia won't take on some schools, or unless they understand that the outcome could be that they are not going to be accredited. And in other states that do Cognia accreditation statewide, that does happen. There does end up being a few schools that do not get accredited. And then they lose those things like their opportunities to have competitive athletic teams and those kinds of things. So that is something that you have to be willing to. So, and then the other thing is that they said if they wanted us, if we wanted to, example, utilize the money that we have set aside to support these schools to have Cognia help us with a system like that, they would need that person, like a transformational coach. Not saying that we would replace the school leadership. The school board of trustees in Montana, obviously hires their school leaders, but it would be a coach. What Julie and Lindsay have proposed and been very, very thoughtful about is like, what if we had someone there that was a go-to? Because part of the problem can be communication. We're finding like you can't get a hold of anyone. So a lot of these schools that we're seeing are facing challenges. They're in high financial risk status. They're in comprehensive status with the Every Student Succeeds Act. They're in accreditation deficiency, right? So that's why we're talking about these that are across the board. And then when we are trying to reach out to provide support or get answers, we're not having anyone to communicate with. So that's kind of thought behind that model of the transformational coach is having someone there that can facilitate that. And we know that there's great people in those schools doing great work, but we know that they are like putting out fire after fire, and their, accreditation report might not be on the top of their list. So, I just wanted to say real quick, and then I know Rob's got something important to say, but I appreciated one of the first calls I got, was from Lindsay and, the school improvement team. Like, we've got to try something different, and we have ideas. And so I'm excited to hear from them and hear from all of you about what we can do, because we know that we can do better and we have to take a new approach. And, we've known that for a long time though, right?
Hannah, and then Rob, and then Jordan.
So my thoughts on the transformational coach is I think the concept works if there's the person in the school to do it who has the proper vision and training and resources and so on. So yes, the problem is sometimes that person either doesn't exist or isn't in a position of authority or is already the principal, for example. So I guess there's challenges around that, because you could create this position and it could be filled potentially by a person who isn't capable, whether skill set or just the mindset to do the work. So I think there needs to be a really thought given to whether those people exist in these districts in the extent that you would need, and if they have the capacity for it.
Yeah, great point. The only thing I'd add, they also have to have the connections, they have to have the trust.
Yeah.
And when you talk about this process, and some of us, I'm looking at you, Madeline, who's been here longer than I. There's not very many people in the room. But this, I mean, we've talked about this intensive support before, and we've had these models before. And I'm not trying to say we've been there, done that. I'm not trying to be that guy. But my question, and where I push everyone, is what are we going to do differently with this 0-year planning? And how do we engage the entire community in that change process, which includes the union? Because it's not just the teachers and the leader and the school board, but it's the entire community in that change process. Otherwise, like I said, that's that intensive support thing that we did maybe 10 years ago. I don't remember about.
Schools of promise.
Yeah, and the sector.
So failure, I was part of it.
Yeah.
And I definitely did that.
Yeah.
So I really like it.
Okay, Jordan.
So 2 questions. First question is for the transformational coach. Would that be an OPI employee? Is that what you were thinking? Or hiring someone that's already in the community?
I think they need to be part of the community.
Like from the community, like living there, and or has ties
To
the
I think
communities.
I'd be really thoughtful, as Ken was saying, like, what's the relationship, as Rob is bringing up, and the connections and the skill set. I think we certainly could support, maybe Sam could support, and the P could support, but how do we provide that leadership coaching for that transformational coach, so that they have like every week ongoing support, and then they know what portions they're working with the community, and how could we help and get Macy's help to get the full community engaged in the process. We would be proposing to utilize federal dollars for school improvement to provide for the training and for the staff of the.
And not just this is kind of like a whole, that was just one point that stood out, the transformational coach, but they would be kind of coordinating everything. Obviously, we need major support of the school board to really step up. The parents, like you said, parent engagement. I mean, they would just be the person kind of leading this whole project, which yes, there's been movements like this before. I guess we're just at that point where we have to take things to the next step, and we're asking, what does that look like?
Lisa?
I have one more question, sorry. just really quickly, so something to consider if it's someone that's returning to a community to accept this position, something that definitely needs to be considered is housing. That's it. Thank you.
Please say that again.
Housing.
Well, yeah. Again.
So when I look at the charter schools, the ones that are really successful have come from the community, and some of the questions on the applications are, where's the community support for this? And what's you top down doesn't work very often. And so I would think that, so in my mind, as I'm considering the options and what happens to these kids if the school is not accredited and shut down, where these kids go. And so in my mind, another option could be, and I don't know about the funding, but okay, so either have a community develop essentially a charter school application, and how are we going to do this, and have a leader somewhere in there lead the application process, or pay for transportation to go to a different school that's accredited. Because I don't want to have the kids be the victims of. The kids are the victims of a school that's not functional, but I don't want them to not have another option where they have to stay home because they can't get to another school. So are you gonna pay for transportation, or are you gonna create a school that functions from the community up?
I guess to answer that question, how many kids are going to Colstrip, Lakeview, Busby, going to Hardin? How many kids from Lodgegrass are going to Dayton, Wyoming? Somebody's paying for that, and it's the parents. Because they want an education for their kids.
I guess,
You know,
if I believe that this is the hammer that it's gonna take to help these schools turn around, then I would be willing to make the motion that that schools that are in this situation are no longer accredited by the Board of Public Education. I would have no problem doing that. And you almost got me there. I think I really believe that there are options. We have more options available now for those students who want to succeed, in those families and those communities that want to do well, that we can do that. I'm also very pragmatic though. And honestly, I also look at this and say, okay, where are these schools at? And I can see the headline saying, Board of Public Education pulls accreditation from tribal schools. And then we're labeled as racist because we targeted the schools on the reservations. I just see that coming. And I don't believe that can be proven, because we do, we're using objective criteria. We have it right there. And not all of these schools on this list are on reservations. And so I don't have any, we'll deal with that lawsuit when it comes. But if this is something that is necessary to get these schools and these communities rolling, and Susie, thank you so much. We have got to do something different. The things that we've been trying haven't worked. And we need to be willing to take that next step. And if that next step means pulling accreditation, then I'm willing to do that. I want to see what we can do with maybe with a 0 year, something like that. Okay, final straw. How many times have we had final straw? Well, I'm in favor of giving one more year. But if you don't get it together, then we're doing something dramatic. And I think we're there. And I appreciate your.
thank you. If I may.
Chance, one more year, you could finally wake it up.
Well, I think if you take your sports away from them, if they know the possibility of their sports, I think you're gonna get their attention big time.
We fought too long and hard to get that high school. I mean, that took a lot of years to get that high school. To see it go, give them another chance, that would be something I think they would wake them up.
I think wake up time is now. Wake up time is now. You can't afford another year of these kids not performing. These boards not performing. These superintendents, principals not performing. These teachers not performing. And I'm gonna tell you, these teachers would perform if they had good leadership.
I agree with that.
And if they had good boardsmanship that supported that leadership, that school would march right down the road and say, we are good. And as far as unions go, teachers, what makes unions? Or boardmanship or leadership. And so, you know, to get rid of, to say, you know, a tenured teacher, you can get rid of a tenured teacher. All you gotta do is do your job.
Yeah. And that's why we wanted to have all the different partners at the table today. And I know that Sam being here, you know, Rob's. He came with his network, MREA has been very quiet in the corner, but I know that Larry will work with his people, School Boards Association, they've got an Indian School Caucus, they'll do what they, and NFB, that's why we brought the partners here. Susan.
Just a kind of a closing thought. I mean, look at the incredible wealth of knowledge in this room. You know, Madeline probably give us the
Time out back.
the do's and don'ts of what, you know, they saw work, and many of you have experienced it in your different communities, and they're all unique, and that's why it needs to be reflective. And I love the work you know, that was done with bringing the strength of the tribe to you know, the school improvement plan, and leveraging those things like basketball, like having open gym at 7:30 so you can get the kids there and get them a meal and get them to class. Like I would like to see us try leveraging all of those best practices that we've learned over the years. Like I said, you know, they were talking about the side conference about that 90 minutes of reading, and I'm like, if we did that my first year as a teacher, and we did turn our reading scores around. We went from one of the lowest performing in the Helena School District. So let's put all those things in place and see what we can do, and then, you know, I mean, at some point, yeah, we do have to address it. But I'd like, you know, not to say that people aren't trying a lot of those things, but we've got to all come together and do our best with the best research, the best practices we know.
You know, I'd just like to do one more year for my year, because Cold Strip kicked out quite a few kids. They wouldn't enroll any reindeer students. They told parents no. These kids some of these kids have been going there since they were in elementary, and they kicked them out. And they didn't have no place to go, so some of them homeschooled, some of them went to language school, some went to Budney, some went to Harvard, depending on where they come from. But you have a school that does not care about Indian children by their actions last year. And they didn't care about the Impact 8 money, but they kicked them out. So I would just give, you know, if this is the final, just give them 1 more year. And let the discussions we've been having with the board and Kim and I, and there is a school board member on there that's from the tribe. I think that you can turn around, just have that feeling. But Colstrip is not the answer for these kids. If they kick kids out of school, there's a problem with that school.
I just want to say, as the MFPE representative, one of our number one goal is that we have successful public schools that put our students first. And we've been having a lot of conversations with our teachers, and all of our teachers just really want to have the resources to meet the needs of all of our students. And we stand ready and willing to work with every single person in this room to achieve that goal. And, you know, I really appreciate, Ivan, you saying that we have to have a school board that's going to say, do this, and that superintendent has to direct the principal, and that principal has to direct our teachers, and if our teachers aren't doing that, we're not gonna protect those teachers. They have to be. But we have to do it right and give our teachers and our principals and our superintendents and our school boards all of the support and the resources they need. And again, I am right now saying that MFPE will commit to doing what we need to do. And Jordan and I have had a couple conversations about some of the things that we would like to do, and I'm all for it, so.
I don't know how close we are to get this by May, I'm sorry. I don't know how close we are to wrapping this up, but. Right here, it shows intensive training for school boards and community. Perfect, that's where that's a start, in conjunction with. The coaches that are going into those schools are providing good training for those teachers. But the superintendent's absent and the principal's absent. So where is the leadership? If you want that hammer, folks, them two folks need to be there. For me as a superintendent to say what OPI is putting forth as training, I need to know that so I can hold the principal's feet to the fire and the teacher's feet to the fire. And then when you look at school board training, if we don't do that and say, okay, we're gonna provide X number of trainings for school boards. And if you're one of these schools, you best be there. And when Sam comes in and says, okay, we're gonna provide training and you're gonna be there. And you will be at those trainings when the OPI comes up for training. You will be there. That's how simple this is, folks. Just that simple. Or you're not accredited.
Well, and I can tell you that, and I can't speak for the entire board, I can just study for myself that I certainly wouldn't want to be the administrator in a school and be the first school in the state of Montana to have your accreditation. And so that's quite a heavy stick and a carrot for somebody to make sure that they're not the one to have that happen. So I would imagine that they would be at the table. That's one more thing, and then I'm gonna move on to public comments.
One more thing is, to answer your, if we come in and hammer the, like you call it the hammer. Coming down there, to not do something is the highest degree of racism, and I said that last year. If you don't do anything, you're sticking your head in the sand and you're a racist.
Thank you. And I can tell you that is the reason why I am in favor of this, because while I might get blamed for being racist because the schools that might lose accreditation are all native schools, I agree wholeheartedly that for us to continue to accept this level of performance and not do anything is the worst form of racism, and accepting it. I agree. At that point, I want to move on. We are beyond the time where we said we would be, but that's just too bad because we've had great conversations. Any public comment on any of our items? Anybody who has an additional final word?
Yes. I'd like to. My name is Bishop Moore. I represent Indian Impact Schools, Montana. I've been on for 16 years. I've been voted back in. I was a part of school improvement. I was a part of schools of promise. And so we had those in place, but you know what, if they didn't work, I'm willing to do it again. I'm a community member now. I'm a grandparent raising a grandchild. I had to put her in the Hayes school because Harlem schools voted just that year not to accept out of district because they hadn't filled their positions for educators, so I understood that. So she was in the Hayes school, but they didn't have the special ed she needed. She's highly autistic, and they're still putting their students in one room. Monday through Friday, they're in one room altogether. So she wasn't learning anything, and so I did everything I could to find the resources for her. And finally, there is a program in Idaho Falls. So right now, she's in Idaho Falls, but if I could get the resources that I need for her in Montana, we could bring her back. So I'm willing, I'll do anything I can to be a part of that community that wants my school district to succeed.
Quick comments. Thank you so much for this community. If any one of us at this table could have done this, we would have already done it. Or any one group could have done it. It's gonna take all of us, every organization, every entity, every person. Thank you. Any other public comment? Seeing none, Montana Board of Public Education will stand in recess, and we will reconvene here tomorrow morning at 8:30.
Thank you.